What's up, everybody? John Maddox here, coming at you with another late-night logical, plausible, probable. We're going to be having an open mic discussion. You never know where we might end up. But I will tell you this, before we're done, we will have put some Evos in their place, because when I'm finished, you done.
In biology, I suppose it would have to be the double helix, Watson and Crick discovery of the structure of DNA, which was far more than just the discovery, the crystallographic work, discovering the structure of a big molecule. Because what that led up to was a major revolution in which much of biology became a sort of branch of information technology. The consequence of the Watson-Crick discovery, with all that it led on to, the DNA code and the sort of various genome projects that are going on now, is that genes, which from my point of view are absolutely central to biology, genes are information. They are coded information. It even looks like computer information. I mean, a chromosome is a great long computer tape. It's linear, it runs one-dimensional, digital code. It's not binary, it's quaternary, but apart from that, it's just the same as computer tape. It's read in sequence. It's copied and pasted from one part of the organism to another in just the same way as a computer programmer would copy and paste. So biology has turned into computer science, and the sort of mystification of biology, which was still possible when people could talk about a life force, a vital fluid, things like that, essentially skyhook explanations, that's completely out. You can never hear anybody talking nonsense like that anymore. And it's all, I won't say it's all due to Watson and Crick, but it was Watson and Crick that really finally torpedoed that kind of thinking in biology. So I suppose as a biologist, I mean, I have to set the great physical discoveries on one side, important as they are, because they're not my field. In my own field, I think I'd have to say Watson and Crick 1953 is the greatest breakthrough in 20th century science.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the stream, to the after show. For everybody coming over from SFT's channel, the awesome discussion they had on chemistry and its relation to evolution over with Professor McQueen. If you haven't seen that, make sure you bounce over and go check out that awesome discussion. And I decided to do this show, and what you just saw there is an interview with Dawkins from quite some time ago. And even though I have used that video multiple times in multiple debates and in discussions after shows to try and convince all of these Evo atheists running around on YouTube that the genetic code actually is a code, they just dismiss it out left and right. It's hilarious. I even had a debate, for some of you who've seen it, I had a debate a couple weeks ago with a guy who, just straight up thinks he beat me, claimed it's a metaphor, and went on and on and on. He has continued to be talking trash to me on YouTube and on Twitter. And anyway, earlier today, I came across an interview over on Stated Casually with John Perry, where lo and behold, he had the one and only Richard Dawkins on to discuss the digital information of genes. And as I was watching this interview, I was cracking up so hard at what you're about to witness. So just stay tuned, folks, because you're going to be like, other than the claim that natural selection somehow can explain the genetic code, you will hear many of the same arguments that I have made about why the genetic code is actually a code. And anyway, it's very fascinating. So for those of you want to know how it's going to work, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through a chunk of this video. We're going to do it a little bit faster speed. And then after that, we'll do a open room discussion. We can hop in. Everybody can talk about things they learned and what really stuck out to them over on SFT's channel, Standing for Truth, with Professor McQueen. And then we can also discuss what you're about to witness here. It's great. Now, so without further ado, let's get into this, and let me make sure I've got the speed on 1.25 so we can get through a little bit quicker. And Here we go. And folks, listen, you're about to, this is where the first section you're going to see here is them talking about a portion of one of Dawkins' books. And yeah, okay, here we go. Let's, without further ado, pay attention, folks. This is going to crack you up to no extent. And the Evo Atheist on YouTube will be doing damage control on this for at least a week.
Which brings me to today's topic. I wanted to go over a paragraph in your book, The River Out of Eden. And in that paragraph, you talk about genetic information. You talk about genetic information as digital information. And you make a prediction in that paragraph of the book that I think, well, it hasn't quite come out the way that you had maybe hoped. And that's one of the things I really want to dig into and discuss is the nature of vitalism today.
Okay, page 17. After Watson and Crick, we know that genes themselves, within their minute internal structure, are long strings of pure digital information. What is more, they are truly digital in the full and strong sense of computers and CDs, not in the weak sense of the nervous system. The genetic code is not a binary code as in computers, nor an 8-level code as in some telephone systems, but a quaternary code with 4 symbols. The machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. Apart from differences in jargon, the pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal. Among many other consequences, this digital revolution at the very core of life has dealt the final killing blow to vitalism, the belief that living material is deeply distinct from non-living material. Up until 1953, it was still possible to believe that there was something fundamentally and irreducibly mysterious in living protoplasm. No longer. Even those philosophers who had been predisposed to a mechanistic view of life would not have dared hope for such total fulfillment of their wildest dreams.
That's an amazing paragraph. The thing I want to talk in there is, this digital revolution at the very core of life has dealt the final killing blow to vitalism. And I don't know how things are in the UK, but here in the US.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you heard what you just heard, but part of the reason I was laughing so hard while listening to this was that just the other day, I was in a atheist stream over on, I think it was Gur Streams, and people were getting into and arguing with me about what digital means. I mean, it's like, I don't even know what universe these people live in. We're arguing over whether or not something is digital, and then they wanted to argue that it was the only thing that's digital is binary, when we have multiple types of code bases. And as you just heard Dawkins point out, versus an 8-character base or a 2-character base, you have a quaternary code, which means 4 symbols. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not that complicated. You should be able to grasp this. You can have multiple symbols in the alphabet, in the source alphabet of a code. It's clear to state. Now, what's ironic, even more ironic to me, is Dawkins wrote that book that's referring to, I think it's late 90s, maybe. I mean, it's been around for a long time. And the other ultimate irony is that so many of these Evo atheists that we debate and talk to always claim to have read Dawkins. They claim to have read his books, but then insist that he doesn't actually mean that it's digital code. I don't know how much more direct you can be. Let's continue.
Yes, people have, instead of accepting that, final killing blow, they have latched on to this concept of code inside the cell, and that's become the new vitalism. I'm from Oregon, and there's a lot of kind of the new age religion there. And this is what one of my friends over there said. She said, information transcends matter. It is non-physical. It must be placed in matter by a creative conscious agent. DNA is proof that we are created by consciousness. And she's a medical student. So she's, smart.
Now, what's funny here is they're going to try and deny that what these other people's conclusions are valid, but they're going to agree that it's code.
Person. A friend of mine from Tennessee says DNA contains real encoded information. If we trace information back to its source, we always come to a mind, never material processes. And then another friend of mine in Chicago says DNA is code. All codes with origins we know were designed. Therefore, the genetic code was designed.
Well, it's a classic circular argument. Your friend, I think the last one you read, said all the codes we know come from a design. Well, it's not true. We know the DNA code. It doesn't come from design. And he's simply going around in a circle there. It really does deal the killing blow to vitalism. I'd like to read, can I go and get a book from 1930 actually to show what I mean by vitalism in this sense?
Yeah.
This is Charles Singer, A Short History of Biology. And I think it was probably in the 1930s, the definitive work on history of biology. Yes, it's the last paragraph. There's further, despite interpretations to the contrary, the theory of the gene is not a mechanist theory. The gene is no more comprehensible as a chemical or physical entity than is the cell, or for that matter, the organism itself. Further, though the theory speaks in terms of genes as the atomic theory speaks in terms of atoms, it must be remembered that there is a fundamental distinction between the two theories. Atoms exist independently, and their properties as such can be examined. They can even be isolated. Though we cannot see them, we can deal with them under various conditions and in various combinations. We can deal with them individually. Not so the gene. It exists only as a part of the chromosome, and the chromosome only as part of a cell. If I ask for a living chromosome, that is for the only effective kind of chromosome, no one can give it to me except in its living surroundings, any more than he can give me a living arm or leg. The doctrine of the relativity of functions is as true for the gene as it is for any of the organs of the body. They exist and function only in relation to other organs. Thus, the last of the biological theories leaves us where the first started, in the presence of a power called life or psyche, which is not only of its own kind, but unique in each and all of its exhibitions. Now, that is absolute rubbish from beginning to end. That is completely and utterly destroyed by Watson and Crick.
So, to be clear, I do agree with you that Watson and Crick and, Rosalind Franklin and all the others really did deal the final blow to vitalism with the discovery of the structure and function of DNA. However, the public doesn't seem to recognize this fact. And that's why I feel like it's so important that we talk about this. I actually have a quote from Watson and Crick. It's their second paper on DNA, and their study of the structure of DNA led them to this conclusion. They say, in a long molecule like DNA, many different permutations are possible, and it therefore seems likely that the precise sequence of the bases is the code which carries the genetical information. Absolutely brilliant. And it was actually predicted ahead of time by Schrödinger in his book, What is Life?, where he talked about, he said that at the core of life, there must be an aperiodic crystal, which is spectacular. He predicted essentially that we would discover DNA. It's something that was predicted and then discovered. And it is so, so beautiful, so incredible to me. And it really does. It breaks my heart that people don't understand the beauty of this. And it breaks my heart that people in the atheist community, or people who like to debate with creationists, have actually thrown this aside as well. It started, I was seeing this among kind of like internet atheists who like to debate with creationists. Their way to combat this idea that the genetic code is real code, codes have to come from a designer. What they were doing is they were attacking the idea that the genetic code is a code, or that there is coded information in life. They were attacking that. They were saying that it's not really code. That's just an analogy. And I actually had a biology professor in the US, tell me that I should stop calling it the genetic code and stop saying that it's code. That's how far the opposition has gotten.
Yes. No, I think that's the wrong approach. I think it is a code. It's definitely a code. And it is a code that's put together, not by a designer, but by natural selection. It's very easy to see how that can happen in principle. Details, of course, need to be worked out. But no.
So if everybody just was paying attention, you'll notice that two atheists, one of which is one of the four horsemen, they're addressing the internet atheist who keeps claiming that it's not actually code, and just dismissing all of the arguments out of hand. So just pay attention. We're going to keep going into this. But the part I find very ironic is, even though they are, waving off the internet atheists, they're now claiming that, natural selection explains this, even though later on they explain that nobody's actually explained how it happens. But this is great. Let's continue.
Nevertheless, there is no problem in saying that DNA would be a code in just the same kind of way as a computer code. It certainly is a code. You can read it as a code. You could even transcribe. I think I put this in River Out of Eden. You could even transcribe a book into DNA letters, and you could read it out again. You could preserve it in DNA and read it again. Put it into, I think I had a fantasy, sort of science fiction fantasy, where a scientist put some secret documents, sort of spy documents, into DNA, and then infected himself with a virus to carry this information and then sneak it out around the world.
Right.
That's how code-like it is. It really is completely code-like code. A digital code is merely quaternary rather than binary. And of course, it's not put together by design. It's put together by natural selection.
Yeah. I think maybe the best
So, folks, does anyone in this room think that somehow my interpretation of what Dawkins just said about the genetic code actually being a real code, am I somehow misunderstanding him? Is there some way that I am possibly misinterpreting the words and the reiterations that have been made by Richard Dawkins about the genetic code actually being a code? Because I think that, I may just not have the capacity to understand and to read all of the papers and to hear all the different times where atheists, PhDs talk about how it's actually code. It's not metaphor, it's not analogy, it's not simile, it's literal, and we've got to just accept this. I mean, folks, am I missing something here? Or is the arguments that I have made over and over and over again to YouTube atheists, are they correct or incorrect? Obviously, I go to a different conclusion of the source requirement, but not what actually has to be explained, which is the code actually code?
The best way to go about this is to just try and talk about what information is in general. I mean, or we could talk about computer code in general too, because that one of the things I think a lot of people in my generation have difficulty understanding. We think of code as this magical thing because the computers that we have are basically like they work like magic to us. Smartphones are so far beyond our comprehension that we can't make sense of them. Whereas when you were first working with computers, things were a lot more mechanical. How they worked was a lot more obvious. Maybe talking about your experience with that would be helpful.
Well, it's true that I went.
Okay, now I really wanted to play this portion of it because if, there's been people who I have made this argument, hey, even Dawkins agrees with me, who claims that Dawkins is somehow just using analogy, doesn't have the knowledge, the expertise. He's a biologist. He's not an information scientist or a computer scientist. Therefore, he doesn't know what he's actually making comparison to. So, ladies and gentlemen, pay very, very close attention to what you are about to hear, because the next time you hear me or anybody else in a conversation with a YouTube atheist and we make this argument, remember what you are about to hear from Richard Dawkins. Let's go. Pay close attention.
And in my career, I have had a sort of rather misspent youth, and part of that was writing machine code programs. With machine code programs, you really are very close to the hardware. You're writing in assembly language, which is just one removed from writing down ones and noughts, and you have to be very familiar with the ones and noughts. So you're very acquainted with the idea that it really is digital. There's a piece of computer tape which is very familiar to me, because when I first started computing, we did everything on punch paper tape like that. In America.
Now, folks, remember that little clip from an interview from years ago that I played earlier, where he talks about it's a computer tape and it's stretched out and just keeps blah blah blah. John Perry just held one up for him and showed him a computer. Oh yes, just like that. What is that, ladies and gentlemen? That is a physical medium. It is not just being data stored in a electrical impulses. It is being stored in a physical medium, and the holes are the data. Oh, man. Okay, let's just continue, folks. Oh, by the way, folks, who's heard me in these debates, you've heard me make the exact same argument about punch cards, the physical medium. The medium that contains it has no relevance to whether or not something actually is a code.
America, at the same time, they were using punch cards. It's the same idea. Mm-hmm. But in Britain, we had British computers had punch paper tape. And so you really were right down there among the digits, among the binary digits, the noughts and ones, and got a very clear conception of the relationship between writing a program and actually putting noughts and ones into the computer. You could even correct errors by changing a one into a naught, or by actually literally punching an extra hole in that tape, or even sticking a bit of tape over a hole that shouldn't be there. So we're that close to it.
Yeah, so I discovered, I didn't even know that these things existed until maybe a couple of months ago. I started looking this up. I was so interested in the similarity between these old punch tape computers and the ribosome, because it's reading this a lot like messenger RNA. You've got each, what do you call this? Each byte here is would be like a codon.
That's an 8-bit tape, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
I was using first of all 5-bit tapes and then 8-bit tapes. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yes, I actually ordered this online because I got so excited about this. This is a Russian system.
Yes.
It's, I mean, the neat thing about these computers is you see that they are just physical machines. I mean, the machine physically interacts with these holes, and that's the holes. The machine is set up in advance in a way so that it's going to behave in a certain way when it hits holes of a certain pattern, and that's how the computer functions. And
in a way, tape is better than cards for that analogy, because cards are discrete objects. If you drop them on the floor, it's a very bad thing I discovered when I went to America and started having to use punch cards. But tape is much more like DNA because it is a long string. And so the analogy is even closer in a trivial sense, of course.
I think that maybe that's one of the reasons that people have difficulty understanding the link between the genetic code and computer code, is because, that basic machine code language is none of us experience. None of us interact with that anymore. And it actually made me think, I wonder if DNA hadn't been discovered right after, we were breaking codes in World War II. And then when people were using stuff like this, I wonder if it would have taken us longer to figure out the genetic code, or if we ever even would have, if we discovered DNA at the wrong point in history.
So it's kind of funny watching John Perry as he's now starting to grasp a lot of the points that I've made for quite some time now, about as he's physically holding that computer tape in his hand, he's realizing the significance of it and why so many people his age and younger are not grasping this, because they are obsessed with the whole premise of electrical impulses, data being stored on either magnetic hard drives or SSD, and just have no premise of the actual reality that a physical medium is still necessary. Even if the physical medium is your hard drive, it's still just on a molecular level is still having to have switches and electrical impulses being stored in a physical medium. But that doesn't mean that the information cannot be housed in something different. Appreciate you, Jerome. You have a great night, man, and hope to see you again soon. And appreciate your support and everything you guys have been doing. All right, let's get back to this.
Interesting. Yes, that's an interesting thought. And you're right, of course, that nowadays, since we're a little bit further away from the machine code level, we're accustomed to dealing with computers at a higher level, where we're dealing with whole programs, and it's almost as though the computers are sort of human. I mean, we talk about it thinks it's a so-and-so, or it thinks it's talking to the wrong kind of printer, that kind of thing. We use metaphoric language like thinking, which is at a higher level. That's rather suitable, actually, for understanding perhaps how the brain works. But for understanding how genes work, the punch, paper, tape metaphor is perhaps a bit more suitable. On the other hand, there are good analogies which we can still use. When I first started programming for the Macintosh, I was no longer using machine code. I used machine code on PDP-8s and mostly PDP-8. Sorry, and Apple II, of course, a lot of Apple II. When I switched to the Mac, I was no longer using machine code. I was using high-level languages. And there, the analogy was rather nice with other aspects of genomics, because when you're programming for the Mac, anyway, when I was doing it, you have a thing called a toolbox, which is a set of pre-written routines which do things like pull down menus, shrinking windows, setting up those little boxes where you click the mouse in and it changes to a dot or an X. So those were all toolbox routines which were built in. And that's a very good analogy for what's going on in the genome. People were rather puzzled when they discovered that the human genome is no bigger than that of other mammals, like a mouse, for example. You sort of think, well, human dignity should require a lot more information. But actually, the genome is about the same size, and the reason is that...
Now, folks, I hope you picked up on what you just heard from Dawkins, and you're going to hear some more in just a moment, but I just want you to think about this. So he's talking about the toolbox and the fact that there's all these different similar components, just like for any programmer now, you have code bases and frameworks and all these different things that you can utilize in order to cut to the chase and not have to rewrite every single thing from scratch every single time. And then it is in modern technology, we're much more fast forward from when Dawkins was doing this. Now we have APIs or application programming interfaces where you can go and access, very complex and, phenomenal third-party systems, or you can potentially do it in your own stuff. You have like multiple systems that are talking if you're like a big company or something. But we go and access this kind of stuff all the time, and you just have to have access to it and then understand how the logic works in order to connect and what the command line, all the commands are and such for that particular API. So it's one of the reasons that I get so fascinated by atheists who run around, Evo atheists who run around claiming that somehow the similarities of the toolbox across different species is somehow proof beyond all doubt of evolution and natural selection. And when that's the irony, it's obviously lost on Dawkins, is that this is like saying if you saw two systems. One of the analogies I use all the time is like WordPress. You saw two websites built on WordPress. Nobody would ever come to the conclusion that because you're using WordPress and a bunch of similar plugins for it, that somehow this means that they evolved one from the other. Nobody would ever make that argument. You would immediately be like, oh, so you're using a design framework in this content management system. And then, oh, wait, you're connecting to the Google Maps API on your contact page to show the map and directions of how somebody's going to get to your physical business. Or, oh, I'm connected to social media channels or platforms so people can like things on my website through that platform. Guys, there's an API connection that's happening there because basically every website on the freaking planet connects to the Facebook API, to Facebook Connect, in order to like do logins and share content directly, all that kind of stuff. Somehow that means it evolved from Facebook? No, of course not. You're just using different components that can be utilized and have access to. Because why? Because the designers and the developers were like, oh, let's do that. Let's create the code base for it. Nobody would ever conclude that those things created themselves, nor the frameworks that were utilized. I mean, it's amazing.
That both mice and people in their embryology are calling routines from the same toolbox of routines. It's just like on a computer, Microsoft Word and Excel and all the other programs that we regularly use. They're all calling upon the same toolbox routines. Mm-hmm. That's why they look so alike. That's why the process of pulling down a menu or shrinking a window, expanding a window, etc. It all looks the same, whatever program you're using. And the reason is that they're all using the same built-in repertoire of toolbox routines. And it's just like that with the genome. So the mammalian genome has this set of toolbox routines. And the difference between a person and a mouse is the order in which those toolbox routines are called. So there's a very nice analogy there, which is at a sort of higher level than the punch paper tape analogy we were talking about earlier.
Claude Shannon, who came up with information theory, everything he was doing was based on communication systems. And it's really neat. I've got a quote of his. This is from his famous paper on the mathematical theory of communication. He says, the fundamental problem of communication is that of producing at one point either exactly or approximately a message selected at another point. In that paper, he goes on to talk about how to digitize information, to make digital information, and what a digital communication system looks like. And if you look at RNA replication, which is, a lot of origin of life researchers think that possibly RNA or something similar to it was the first thing fully capable of replication in Darwinian evolution. And if you look at how RNA replication works, it is exactly this. I mean, you can actually describe RNA replication with all of Claude Shannon's math as a communication system. You start with the original chain of RNA that is encoded into a antisense chain of RNA, which is then decoded back into a copy of the original parent. So you have this encoding and decoding that happens even at the basic level of RNA replication. And I find that really interesting because that.
Very quick interjection. So for those of you who missed it, in my debate with Jeffrey Williams over on S.J. Thomason's channel, that clown show claimed that there was no mathematical comparison to code and that Shannon information had zero relevance to the had zero relevance to the debate and whether or not the genetic code was actually a code or not. And irony of ironies, you're now hearing them talking about atheists again. Remember, atheists, folks, one of which being one of the four horsemen of the new atheist movement, Richard Dawkins himself. They're discussing the relevance of Shannon information on the genetic code and the fact that it's directly applicable.
It suggests that this digital nature of things, I mean, a nucleotide either is replicated or it's not. There's not really an in-between. I mean, you can get mutations, you can get the wrong nucleotide put there, but it's digital information in the sense that it's either or, and that stops some of these runaway errors that would otherwise happen if you're trying to create a replication system. It stops noise from getting into the system, too much noise from getting into the system.
I agree, and information theory has been used a lot in biology. Shannon, as you know, worked for the Bell Telephone Company, and so he was concerned with economics of information transfer. And so he wanted to think of ways in which information could be most economically encoded, and he came with the idea of the bit of information as the fundamental unit of information. Information for him meant reduction of uncertainty. It was actually measured as reduction of uncertainty, and his formula measured it like that. One of the things that comes out of Shannon-type mathematics is this idea that information as a commodity is easily translated into other media. So it doesn't matter whether it's in the form of punch paper tape or little blips on magnetic tape or little noise Morse code or little noises going down a wire. If it's in the same, if it's translated from one digital code to another, then it can be faithfully rendered at the other end with a certain possibility of error. And I very much like the idea. I've been very inspired by the idea of information as a commodity, which, as you just described it, can be translated from one medium to another and retains its value.
Folks, I hope you didn't miss what he just said. That if you have a digital code, it can be translated from one medium to the other because it's a digital code. It can translate it into a different genetic code or different code if it is originally digital. This, ladies and gentlemen, you are hearing the exact same arguments that I use in relation to why the genetic code is actually a code from people who disagree with me on their origin. But the fact on the origin of the code, but the fact that the foundational logic is correct, that all of the arguments I make are applicable in relation to something actually being a code. Let's continue.
Retains its meaning throughout all these different translations. Shannon was concerned with the economics of information transfer such that nothing is lost or little as possible is lost, different from the semantics, from actually what the information means, which is a whole separate subject.
Let's try and unpack this even more. So what is information in general, in your view? And then what is information in genetics specifically? Maybe that could be helpful.
Well, as I said, Shannon described it as, or measured it as, reduction in uncertainty. So when it's transferred from one place to another, in human terms, you start with the idea that there's a sender and a receiver, right. and the receiver doesn't know something that the sender does know. So Shannon was aware that something like the sun rose this morning contains much less information than the sun did not rise this morning, because the receiver already expects that the sun would rise, and therefore the reduction of uncertainty, the surprise value, is less. So the one bit of information is that which halves your uncertainty. Right. If you have something like if I turn up a card for an ordinary pack of cards and I ask you to guess the color of the card, your uncertainty is exactly twofold. It could be red or it could be black. So if I tell you it's black, that's one bit of information. It's been reduced by it's been divided in half. If I tell you it's a heart, that's two bits of information, because you don't know whether it's a color, and secondly, given that it's red, say whether it could be a heart or a diamond. So that's how he measured information. And you can measure information exactly in the same way in the genetic code, it being a quaternary code rather than a binary code. It's a little bit more complicated.
I have had on my show Dr. David Fiallo, and we were
Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard him talk about the genetic code as a quaternary code, not binary, but that the logic, the principles that Shannon was talking about are directly applicable. If it is not actually a code, you cannot apply the same principles that only apply to a code if it is not a code. I don't know how many times I have to repeat myself on this, but apparently I don't know. I've bashed atheist heads with this over and over and over again, and they seem to refuse to grasp it. So I'm just letting an atheist do it for me.
We're talking about, what is information in biology, and he was explaining that the base information in biology is nucleotide sequences. Sequence information is the thing that's being communicated from parent to child. But that doesn't necessarily have any sort of meaning to it, right? It could be a random chain of RNA, for example. Claude Shannon wasn't interested in meaning. He was just interested in how do you transfer information from one thing to another. If you talk about this in biological terms, he's interested in replication. How do you get a system going that can replicate a chain of RNA, for example? But in biology, we also care about meaning. And what I mean by that is that, the specific sequences in our DNA help us better survive and reproduce. And what you've so beautifully spent your career explaining is really, I guess you could say, is where that meaning comes from. This is what Darwin explained through the process of natural selection. As soon as you have a system capable of replicating, you can get Darwinian evolution.
Now, folks, what did you just hear? You just heard right there. Once you have a system capable of replication, then you have Darwinian evolution. But they don't have it. They have not explained this, and they have not explained the origination of the genetic code. Oh, crap. Oops, I just skipped way far back. Where was I? Well, oh, there we go. Let's see.
He was just interested in how do you transfer information from one thing to another. If you talk about this in biological terms, he's interested in replication. How do you get a system going that can replicate a chain of RNA, for example? But in biology, we also care about meaning. And what I mean by that is that, the specific sequences in our DNA help us better survive and reproduce. And what you've so beautifully spent your career explaining is really, I guess you could say, is where that meaning comes from. This is what Darwin explained through the process of natural selection. As soon as you have a system capable of replicating, you can get Darwinian evolution. And just automatically, those sequences which happen to be better at reproducing than others end up becoming more common in the population. And you get this explosion of not just information, but useful information that's useful in the project of surviving and reproducing. You've written about these RNA experiments where this was actually demonstrated in the lab through Spiegelman's monster, right?
Yeah, so Spiegelman had a virus called Q beta, an RNA virus. So it's genes are entirely made of RNA, and it needs an enzyme in order to replicate its RNA, and this is called Q beta replicase. Yes, I'm going to read a paragraph from the Ancestor's Tale here. Spiegelman did something wondrous. He set a form of evolution in motion in this wholly artificial test tube world with no cells involved at all. Imagine his setup as a long row of test tubes, each containing Q beta replicase, that's the enzyme, and raw building blocks, but no RNA at all. He seeded the first tube with small amounts of Q beta RNA, and it duly replicated lots more copies of itself. He then drew out a small sample of the liquid and put a drop of it in the second tube. They've got a whole lot of tubes, one after another, representing generations. When this had been going on for a while, Spiegelman drew out a drop from the second tube and seeded a third virgin tube, and so on. Spiegelman sampled the RNA in his tubes as the generations the tube went by, and monitored its properties, including its potency in infecting bacteria. That this virus is a phage, which means it's a parasite of bacteria. So it needs to affect bacteria. And what he found was fascinating. The evolving RNA became physically smaller and smaller, and at the same time less and less infective when bacteria were offered. It didn't need to infect bacteria because it was doing it all in the test tube. It was provided the necessary way to live in the test tube. After 74 tube generations, the typical RNA molecule in the tube had evolved to a small fraction of the size of its wild ancestor. What was even more remarkable is if he did the experiment several times, he always converged upon the same RNA, which was called Spiegelman's monster, or Spiegelman's mini variant. And then later, some German workers did a similar experiment, which was even more remarkable. Under some conditions, a test tube containing no RNA at all, just the raw material for making RNA, plus the Q beta replicase enzyme, can spontaneously generate self-replicating RNA, which under the right circumstances will evolve to become.
Okay, so what's so funny about everything you're hearing right there is that they were using pre-existing replicase, which is something that they're having to explain at the origination point. And they're saying that, oh, if I have this already, then I can do something else that doesn't actually create new functionality. And it actually gets less. It's kind of crazy. But I think at that point, I'm just going to kind of wrap this up for right now. And we'll kind of turn this over into an open discussion. So if anyone wants to join, I have pinned the link. I hope everybody's kind of enjoyed this general dive into it. They actually go into more detail later on, but I think the point has been proven. And yeah, hopefully we can help some of the YouTube Evo atheists to, maybe at least suspend their standard talking points and recognize that, perhaps this is there's a little bit more to this than what they're actually claiming. But we'll see if that may be a little bit too much to hope for, but it's possible, folks. It is possible that the YouTube atheists will actually begin to grasp reality and realize that their talking points, whether or not they can overcome them or whether or not it is within the realm of possibility that somehow an explanation for the origin of said code is possible, that doesn't mean they can just deny its existence. It's really bad. It's really bad. But as Ray says, Q beta replicase is a large complex of proteins that wouldn't form naturally. I agree with you completely, and it's amazing how so many of these things just get glossed over. Like, oh, look what I was able to do with all of these tools. I mean, if you hand me a log and I have no tools, and then I somehow turn it into a intricate carving of wooden statue, and then say nope, I had no tools, I just did this all with my with chance, you're gonna say you're a liar, you're making things up, stop being a complete and utter clown show. But then on the flip side, if I had chisels and jigsaw and a plethora of other detailing tools, and then I created this, entirely different story and totally within the realm of possibility. It's the exact same kind of thing that we're talking about here, except on the molecular scale, which actually requires even greater levels of precision than what we do with our tools now, which is kind of amazing. But okay, so folks, anybody wants to join, link is in the it's pinned. I posted it in chat, and I would like to kind of turn this into open discussion. We can talk about this video. We also discuss what happened over on SFT's channel and their great conversation about chemistry and evolution with Professor McQueen, which I thought was great. Great conversation. It's part of the reason I decided to do this stream. Figured it would be a good kind of segue over from all things they were talking about and just kind of reiterate the significance of a lot of the things that we discuss on a regular basis of, what is actually required for life? What are the fundamental necessities that must be accounted for? And what is the more rational, the more logical, the more plausible, the more probable conclusion to be reached? Is it that, as Dawkins says, that somehow through natural selection, this code somehow formed itself when it didn't even have the necessary replication factors that are necessary for their own Darwinian evolution explanation to occur? But be that as it may, is that more rational, or is it just a more sane conclusion that an external intelligent agent was necessary for the quite arguably the most complicated code from an information transfer, multiplexing, multiple layers of code and information transfer. It's being executed on the molecular level in one of the most optimized from a compression perspective data storage medium that is DNA, that we humans are currently spending billions of dollars attempting to replicate right now. Is that technology more likely to be the result of the actions of a very, very, very intelligent agent, or did it just happen by chance? And I think that you have to have a greater level of faith to come to the conclusion that somehow it's not that is not the smarter end conclusion than the standard Evo atheist talking point. Something of which they just don't understand for themselves and don't want to appreciate. Cheryl says, I wonder if answers in atheism, that's for those who don't know, that is pudding brain, also known as speed of sound of gravity. I wonder if answers in atheism will be covering this tomorrow. You know, I do tend to inspire some of their weather reports, and I would not be surprised if that ends up happening, even though they will more than likely will cling only to the portion where he says that natural selection explains it, not the fact that just a couple days ago they were claiming that the code thing is not really true. Well, it sort of is, but it's sort of not. I mean, I don't know how much more direct you have to be than what Dawkins was tonight. And I mean, heck, they were even making fun of me in my debate with Jeffrey Williams when I had a brain fart and said Charles Dawkins versus Richard Dawkins. And it really is amazing. But let's see. Well, if nobody's going to join and have a conversation, I guess we might wrap this up. But let's see what else has been going on in chat while I've been doing this. I want to say thank you very much to Doki Doki, Jerome, Conrad, Honesty Angel, and Alec for all of their super chats. Very much appreciated. Alex says, LAMAO at Doki, the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. That means nothing. I think that was in response to Doki Doki saying, Paul Revere, two lanterns is only metaphor. This doesn't tell me anything. That's very true. It's fascinating. Fascinating what happens here. Standing for truth. Answers in atheism has never actually provided an answer to anything. I would have to agree with that. It is that whole channel is like it's a cuddle session, and it's really funny that whole group. I don't think they do anything other than spend their evenings pouring through different channels and streams that are like 2 o'clock in the morning and creating timestamps for them to discuss and whine about the next day. It really cracks me up. Like listening to their streams it's like being the fly on a wall in a group therapy session as they all try to, validate each other, continue to perpetuate their talking points, debunk others without actually having any substance, and mostly not even grasping the underlying points that are being made especially from a big picture perspective, and then claiming that their talking points are 100% valid, even though very often they admit they don't actually understand what they're claiming. It's truly, truly amazing. Standing says, Speedy should change its channel name to Atheist Group Therapy Session. Yep. It's very good. Well, I guess nobody's going to join. We'll wrap this up. I think I was going to do an after show, but I guess everybody's off doing other stuff. I hope everybody enjoyed this little review of the Dawkins and John Perry interview. There's even more juicy stuff in it. I kid you not. I'll put a link to the original interview in the description. It's totally worthwhile to go and watch the whole thing because it's like they go into even more detail back and forth, and they get into like trying to explain how signal theory could somehow explain all this when, per their own admission, you have to already have the replication for signal theory to have application. It's pretty interesting, but make sure to go over and take it out. We got before we wrap up. What's up, Jungle? Hey, Jungle, I think you're on mute. Jungle, if you're saying anything, you're on mute, buddy. Ray says, answers in atheism have decided John is dumb. Yes, I am quite possibly one of the dumbest people on YouTube. I am absolutely blind, unknowledgeable, actually understand any of the points that are being made. Oh, well, maybe we will have a show after all. What's up, Alec? How you doing?
What is going on, brother? Long time no talkadoo.
Yeah, yep, hanging in there. How
I
you
miss
been?
jungle as well.
What'd you say?
I miss jungle as well. I was just putting my nose to the grindstone, working. And yeah, 3 hour debates and stuff like that. Just can't get paperwork done properly. So it's all right though.
That's understandable.
Glad you guys
Ray.
are still doing it.
Yeah,
Hi, John.
yeah. Hey, Ray, how are you, sir?
Oh, pretty good. How you doing?
I am hanging in there. I don't know. You may have actually gotten more entertainment out of this than I did, but when I came across this interview earlier today and was watching it, I was just cracking up. Fuck, I cannot believe I'm hearing this right now. You remove natural selection from the equation, and the arguments, the words out of Richard Dawkins' mouth could have been the exact same points that you've made, I've made, Alex made, Jungle's made, so many people have made to the atheist on YouTube, to which we get the never-ending, it's just a metaphor, it's not actually real, you're making things up, it's just chemicals, etc., etc. What did you think?
Well, I agree. Yeah, they just pretend to be dumb, as near as I can tell. You know, they just refuse to see the point because they know that if they acknowledge that it's a code, then they have to acknowledge that it just couldn't happen by accident. Codes just don't appear by accident.
No, they do not, and it's really interesting to me how, and I don't know, I think if I remember correctly, you're retired now, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, so the point that Dawkins was making about the computer tape probably had a little bit more relevance to you, just given the fact that I'm sure were you still like in the professional world when that still existed, right? In terms of yeah, the only reason I know about it and have a background is my father worked in computers, and yeah, I remember goofing around on Ataris and way back in the 80s, but he showed me punch cards of programs he had written when he was in college. And that's where my knowledge of that significance came from, even though I ended up being involved in tech later on. I had the underlying background information on how computers used to work, right? I remember seeing the pictures of the gigantic computers from the 50s and the ones that NASA used. I remember seeing of course they were using magnetic tapes by then, and all the spinning dials and everything. But people really 10 years older than me and below have absolutely no idea about any of that, and it just completely goes over their head. And the premise that it's just electricity floating around, that's code. The whole premise of the physical medium seems to completely go over their heads.
Yeah, well, not only is it it's comparable, but it's also not, because on the DNA, the opposite strand has to also have information too. So I mean, it'd be one thing to write a code, using anything, tape or punch cards or whatever, but to also write a code that has to parallel, whatever code you enter, there has to be a corresponding code on the other side, and not have it be nonsense.
Well, that's right, and something I would love, because I know your background's in, if I remember correctly, you were a biochemist, right?
No, I was a chemist.
Something that has always really struck me is the whole premise of the alternative splicing and the binding sites that are very often in the introns, and how they work with the spliceosomes and such to reorganize the digital information into a different functional outcome. I mean, when I think about that in terms of like basic programming, that's insane. Just think about that, to be able to like, oh, no, you can just like move these lines here and here and here and here and here and here and here, and presto, you now have an entirely new function. That's mind blowing. Number one, just from even if you were intelligent. Go ahead.
I don't know who is going to talk, but I guess maybe they decided not to.
Oh no, I was listening to the finishing touch on that, and I muted myself again.
Oh, gotcha. Well, I mean, the point I was going to make was, as a chemist, I'm assuming when you guys were creating new formulas and developing different things, I mean, the significance of like the location of different molecules was of extreme importance. And correct me if I'm wrong, but getting them in the right spot is not always an easy thing to do. And that's not even accounting for that. And that's just to have it like once we get it there, sweet. That's what we're trying to accomplish versus let's get it here. And then on the fly, without us being involved, it can move and create something new. Is that a fair point to make from a chemist perspective?
Well, we really didn't even try to do something like that. I worked mainly with silicone polymers, and so what we really wanted was, a certain, well, say the customer's going to use it for fiber optic cables. We'd want to have a lot of phenyl groups on there, so it'd have a high refractive index. So we would just be concerned that certain percentage of phenyl got into the polymer or the resin, as the case may be. But we had absolutely no control over what happened. You just throw the monomers in there, or the different chemicals, and let them run riot. And statistically, it comes out the way you want it to. We couldn't. Well, I suppose we could have. In school, I remember doing a synthesis of vanillin, and we used protecting groups and stuff like that. And actually, it ended up not working, but it was good anyways. But yeah, I mean, the idea of stacking these molecules the way they are in proteins and DNA and all that stuff, that's just you need well, it would either be more luck than the entire universe contains 50 times over, or it was an ingenious god.
What do you mean, Ray? You didn't get a mouse out of all that? Just popped up. Imaginary, midnight. You come in, you're eating a jelly donut and a coffee. Oh my God, there's a mouse.
Yeah, no weird science. I didn't animate a Barbie doll into a hot woman or anything like that either.
That takes special electricity.
Alec, the mouse, there were billions of years for the mouse to form, buddy. Like, I need you to just realize if you have enough time, anything is possible.
And they only used to give one baby, not a litter. So they found out they got eaten so much that they had to produce more per litter. And then third generation, they eat their babies. So that's how that works.
Welcome, Otangelo, and Jungle is back. Jungle, do you have is your mic working now?
Yeah, but I'm on the slower connection now, the one that goes way to the satellite and comes back.
Okay, you came through. Is it you getting a lag, or are you being able to hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome.
I don't know how much it's lagging, but
it doesn't seem too bad yet.
It's lagging.
It is. Okay. Did you get the oh crap? What was it? Is the Elon Musk's new man, what is the name of that thing? I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on this right now. Did you get the new like SpaceX one or?
Yeah, I ordered it, but I haven't. Somehow I didn't get any response to it or anything yet, or maybe I'm still in line. I'm not sure.
So you signed up for the?
I don't know.
You signed up for the beta.
Yeah, I did. You gave me the link and I signed up for it, but I didn't hear back for it, or I didn't either that, or I didn't see their email back to me or something. I don't know.
No, okay. Well, I know they were putting people on the waiting list, and it's like it's different areas are coming up next. So maybe you're just not in where you are physically is not one of the test zones yet.
I think it's like the chip.
Well, I'm way.
Go ahead.
I'm way out there. No, I'm just way out there.
I was going to say it's probably like the chip that they're trying to get for the new cars, because there aren't any new cars, and because of the chip that's made in Taiwan. So maybe that's how, I blame it on China.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. We do have a technological shortage. It's crazy. Otangelo, welcome to the stream, brother. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm fine, John. I just had a look at the video which you posted, and at 5 minutes and 25 seconds, what Richard Dawkins says is just precious.
I know. Oh, Tangela, you need to watch that entire video. It was like there are so many like just hilarious talking points, like little clips to pull out of it. I will be editing that quite a bit, and you just like cutting up little clips. And the next time I'm discussing with atheists, I'm just gonna start playing them. I'm gonna ask them a question that's relevant. They're gonna respond and tell me that I'm out to lunch and don't know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna click it and be like, okay, so don't debunk me, debunk him. And are you claiming he doesn't know what he's talking about? Because right there, he was just talking about how he used to write machine code. Are you claiming that the guy that used to write machine code on computer tape doesn't know what machine code is? Is that your position?
But John, isn't it staggering that Richard Dawkins isn't getting it that such things cannot emerge by unguided means?
Well, the desperation. I mean, at this point, you have to, in my opinion, I don't know what you guys think, but in my opinion, it's people like Dawkins and Jeffrey Williams, who I debated a couple weeks ago, and other folks, the James Downards of the world, they are old, just to be blunt. And they are in the validation stage of life. And if they admit to themselves that what they have spent decades, literally these guys, their professional lives or huge portions of their life, convincing themselves and also actively attempting to convince others, and it's part of who they are. If they admit that they are incorrect, from their perspective, they will be invalidating their entire life. And that is a gigantic challenge for somebody to admit. And for those who believe that there is nothing beyond this stage of existence, then the premise of invalidating your entire life is a much bigger chasm than for somebody who's like, oh, well, this is only the first blink of my existence, and I was wrong on X. Okay, but I'm about to be immortal, so not that big a deal, And I'm not saying it's that easy for somebody to admit that they're wrong, but it's dramatic. There's been studies on this. I read one a couple years ago. I've been trying to find it again. It's pissing me off. I can't find it, but they went into great detail about the differences between those who the mental flexibility of people in the validation stage of life who believe in another stage of existence. They don't have to be Christian for any of the atheists out there. I'm not talking about people who are just Christian. I'm talking about people who believe in another stage of existence. The mental flexibility was dramatically different to the extent of
but I mean, it's not impossible. If you see Anthony Flew, who became a deist precisely because of the DNA evidence, and that after being a lifelong leading atheist. So it is not impossible.
Oh no, I definitely agree. It's not impossible. I'm just saying that it explains the kind of the question you raised of how can Dawkins not know this? What? And that's the point I was making.
I guess it's a pride thing. God, he says that pride's a really bad thing. It's like they're going to throw away eternal salvation just for their pride.
Yeah, but Geppetto had to wait a while for his puppet to turn into a boy.
Let me just play this here.
Same science.
All the origins we know were designed. Therefore, the genetic code was designed.
Well, it's a classic circular argument. Your friend, I think the last one you read, said all the codes we know come from a design. Well, it's not true. We know the DNA code. It doesn't come from design. They simply...
So I don't know if you hear that. All codes that we know of come from design. Well, that's not true because the DNA code doesn't come from design. How does he know that?
Yeah, exactly. Molecules don't care about stuff. They wouldn't know if the code was right or wrong. They just want to get to a lower energy state, and that's it.
Exactly. How does he know that the DNA code emerged randomly or by natural means? I mean, it is just staggering. Isn't it obvious that he is just making a baseless claim? I mean, do you have to be a genius to not getting this?
I guess it all goes back to the pride thing.
I don't know. And how is it that others do not getting it, that he makes just a baseless claim?
Well, a lot of people just reject things, I mean, you can just look at just simple calculations of probability for a protein and or DNA, whichever you care to look at, how many different ways they can combine and how many different combinations there are and all that kind of stuff, and just conclude right then and there that there's not a chance in the world that just one protein could form by accident. Yet, that doesn't impress people for some reason.
Yeah, but you don't know how many times I have heard atheists saying, well, is the chance 0? And if you say, well, no, then they say, well, okay, so then there is a chance.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story. This guy who was a curator or a worker at a mint, some guy called up and said he had a two-headed coin. He wanted to know if it was real. And the guy says, well, in order for that to have happened, it would have had to have fallen off a table, rolled all the way back to the other end of the mint, got back up onto the table and gone through the process again. And so the guy says, oh, so you mean there's a chance it's real?
Yeah, but I mean, they say, well, you can try simultaneous trials and things like that. And if the chance isn't 0, so there is a chance. I mean, it's just plain silly.
Well, what I always find interesting too is the refusal to accept the premise that improbabilities that exceed the total probabilistic resources for the entire universe, even giving it 13.8 billion years, that means it's implausible. like this is not and the way they just scoot over, like, no, you don't understand. There were multiple trials happening simultaneously. I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm talking about the total possible actions of the particles in the universe. If you're exceeding it doesn't matter how many you have happening at the same time. We're talking about the total number of the total possible actions of any particle in the entirety of the universe, not the ones that are just limited on the Earth. We're talking for the entire universe in all 13.8 billion years, which you don't have to account for because we only have 10.8 or 10 to the 16th power of total seconds. That's the entire universe. But per them, you've only had no more than 500 million years. So let's think about this for a second. Your probabilistic resources are minuscule compared to the total number, and then the improbability is greater than the total possible available to you. This is not at what point do you recognize that the improbability of this, it's real? This is not something you can just gloss over at all.
Yeah, and that's ignoring all the chemical problems you're going to have with these things, combining in the right ways and the number of resources you have.
Well, they do
I was yesterday
they do believe everything came from nothing, so everything's possible.
I was yesterday on Discord. Wow, what's happening? Someone is echoing.
Go ahead, Angela. I think it was Alec was echoing. He's on mute now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yesterday I was on Discord and someone said, well, science has proven that DNA can emerge by natural means. And I said, give me the science paper. He said, well, there are 4 hypotheses. They just don't know which one of the 4 is the right one. And I said, do you even understand something about this stuff? He said, well, I mean, if I have to choose between you and the experts, I go with the experts. I mean, they are just using blind faith in what others say without understanding anything about what they claim.
Well, if you guys want to hear something funny, here is the a little clip from later on that was beyond where I stopped, where they're talking about this. I think this is the right spot, which kind of correlate with what you're talking about there, Angela.
RNA is a thing capable of this, but RNA replication system is probably not prebiotically plausible. This is what Origin of Life researchers are looking for. They're looking for a prebiotically plausible system like this that could have emerged on the early Earth. Because once you have Darwinian evolution, you've got information replicating, you can get functional information to evolve, and the whole game just explodes.
Quite right. Once you've got replication, once you've got DNA going, and you're right that DNA is definitely not a viable system on its own. RNA kind of is, but as you say, it's not prebiotically viable. It's hard to see how you can actually get right. So there has to be something for that, and that's okay. We haven't found it yet, but it's something. RNA is a very good bridge, and RNA is a better one than DNA because RNA does function as an enzyme. DNA doesn't. DNA needs enzymes.
Did you hear that? He just used the materialism of the gaps. We don't have the answer yet, but that's okay. So, but whatever answer will come up, it will be a naturalistic one.
And what I find so funny is it's admitted, okay, DNA it's not plausible. RNA, well, not really. It kind of do some of it, but not really. There must have been something else before that. We don't know what the heck that is, but there must have been something before that that accounts for that, even though we can't, they can't even account for the RNA to DNA bridge that would be required.
That's a huge bridge.
Which is which is a gigantic bridge.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, hold on. You can't even account for this one. And then you're simultaneously admitting that the one you can't account for doesn't allow for the origin of the one that you can't account for.
Yeah, yesterday
think about that. Think about that, folks. Think about what the level of faith and hope and belief that is necessary for that worldview, while simultaneously claiming that those of us who dismiss it for a plethora of reasons, what we just heard being one of them, the admission that we just heard being one of them, somehow we are the ones who are clinging to God of the gaps mindset and being told that we're not being rational, we're uninformed, we don't believe in science. Anyway, I yield. Who wants to respond to that? Feel free.
Well, even if you have the RNA enzymes, you still, they don't translate directly into the protein enzymes that you're going to need later on. So, even if you do have the stopgap measure of RNA enzymes, you're still not out of the woods.
I mean, even RNA, how do you get RNA prebiotically? Yesterday they came up, that has already been solved. It was on clay. I said, hey, the issue about clay has nothing to do with the origin of RNA. And then I asked, do you even know what the 5 bases are? Oh, I have no idea. I mean, these guys, they just parrot things that they have no clue about.
Yeah, Dr. Tour already explained that. Said what they did is they just got the RNA from a lab, put it on the clay. It didn't grow out of the clay.
How do you get RNA prebiotically? How do you get the 5 bases prebiotically? How do you join them at the right place together? How do you get ribose? How do you get it stable? The
sugars is a key. It got me kicked out of Baylor.
I mean, this already is game over, and people just ignore it and go on and overlook it.
Well, government grants would slow down. You wouldn't get the millions of dollars to each university from the Science Act back in LBJ's days. And that's how it is. That's why you have these universities that are costing $40,000-$50,000 to go to, because that tuition can't handle, because they're only getting a certain amount of money from the grants. And the grants, they aren't slowing down. It's just a lot of money that they're asking for, and they don't always get that money. That's where it is. And then they flip around and say, oh, there's a lot of money in young Earth creation. Yeah, but that's private funds. None of it's from the government. You try and get one of those through the government on a grant. Have you ever seen a grant form? Have you ever tried to fill one out? That stuff it's worse than spaghetti. You can't even see the end of it, and they'll reject it. So that's where this fits, because then every school would have to change its textbooks. That's more money. They think that the science would slow down. You wouldn't have as many people going into science. It's just it's a money game. It really is, for the love of money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You,
I
you know,
agree with you.
something I've been contemplating is the ongoing talking point about how, well, number one, supposedly, if you believe God created it, therefore you don't believe in science, and you want science to stop, all innovation, all exploration into biology would cease. I just do not buy that.
No,
And
look at all the things. Look at all the things that came from, Christian, who were scientists.
Well, I agree. I agree with you, but not even that. I'm talking about from a recruitment perspective, right? So, what do we see happening at biotech firms around the globe right now? They're going after young people and telling them, but they have conferences where they get keynote, they pay crap loads of money to be able to give speeches at computer science conferences, right? And like programming, all that kind of, information theory. And they tell people, they sit there and explain to these young, recent graduates or kids that are still in college for computer science and such, hey, did you know that the technology that's being developed or what we're discovering about information processing inside of cells or things about neural nets, all this kind of stuff, did you know that this is way bigger and way more challenging and way more innovative than what you're learning about in school right now? And they're spending tons of money trying to recruit young people to come and figure out how this stuff works, right? So let's think about this. What if you took it a step further and you're making the same argument, same explanations of how it all works, but then it was, we are doing reverse engineering. This is the most advanced technology created by a supreme being with unfathomable intellect. And we are discovering the most mind-bending innovations of all time. Do you want to come and figure out how this works? I argue that would recruit more brain power to biomimicry and just biology in general than this, we got to go figure out how things randomly happened.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Other people are going to sleep. I'm tired, but thanks for putting up that video. I'll watch it tomorrow, and certainly interesting to see what they have to say.
Absolutely. I'll change. Thanks for stopping by, man. Have a great night. Get some sleep.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Good night, D'Angelo.
No, take it easy. Yeah, that was my question. My question was, how do they think that they can get the information for a living organism or any directly working mechanism at all by making mistakes?
I mean, that's
just
that's a good question. It's the question that everybody has to ask themselves, like that's why, John Perry was making a good point about, people his age not, thinking computers are just magic and it just happens. And it's one of the reasons, with my software company, I mean, I hired developers, we wrote code. I mean, I cannot tell you the number of nights I stayed up all night because we had a delivery to a client the next day. I remember one time a publicly traded company was a client of mine called, and they had their earnings call on Monday. I was on vacation. I was at the beach, and I get a phone call from their investor relations guy. And he's like, so you know how you told me that we needed to get X, Y, and Z security protocols? And we said, no, we didn't need them. Well, we just got hacked. And I have a investor earnings call on Monday, and I don't want them to see this. So me and my business partner at the time, my vacation ended, and we spent the next 2.5 days building them an entirely new website from scratch. And I basically didn't sleep for 2 days straight. And at like 7:30 a.m. Monday morning, we went live and had it ready to cover his ass for his investor earnings call. And of course, I ended up turning that into a nice contract. But either way, the point is that when I think about all of the stuff that we had to know, all the things that had to be pre-existing, the different scripts that we grabbed and piecemeal together to put together all the stuff in 2 days and have it ready to roll and them to look good, in a very short period of time. If we had been having to write all that from scratch, we couldn't have done it. And B, if we didn't have all sorts of foreknowledge of what was necessary and how things worked and systems worked, there's not a chance we could have possibly pulled that off. And so when I look at these systems in biology that are just so mind-blowingly beautiful and complex, and then for people to argue that somehow with enough time, those things can just all organize themselves into working systems, I just want to laugh at them. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I'm very rude and insult them. But it's like, what world do you guys live in? Honestly, what? Oh, only 1.5% of the genome is code, is like functional code. Yeah, what about the regulatory components? Okay, so you guys going to claim that like the CSS has no relevance to the PHP in terms of the end outcome? Like, come on, folks. What world do y'all live in where there's so many different underlying components that control different facets of what we view as technology that have their own underlying logic? Which, what are we learning about now? All these things about the regulatory aspects of the rest of the genome. Now, for example, today I came across a paper that this will just kind of blow your minds. Did you know that vitamin D is projected to be a master regulator for over 2,000 different genes? That blew my mind. Didn't surprise me at all, but it's kind of amazing.
What's up, I think that's one of the. Oh, it's Sal. Hey, Sal.
Go ahead.
Hey, how are you? Long time no see, everyone.
Absolutely. Real quick, Sal, Ray, go ahead and make your point. And then I think Sal had some big news, but some cool things happened. I didn't know about this until a few minutes ago, Sal. Go ahead, Ray. What was your point? And then welcome, Sal.
Well, I think a lot of these people who are evolutionists, they walk into or just consider the whole thing the way I did when I walked into my first biochemistry class. I was thinking, well, all this stuff happened by accident. So how hard and how complicated could all this be? You know, I was, I guess you'd call me a lukewarm evolutionist at the time. You know, I saw the charts with all the different animals and the different lines, and the parade of men walking along. So I thought, okay, evolution's a thing. But then you get into it, it's like just the cell membranes, to regulate the different ions and ion specific channels. It's like, whoa, this is pretty complicated for something that happened by accident. Then eventually we got into DNA and then how it was copied, and I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. And then transfer RNA, and okay, this is really looking shaky. And then we got to the was it amino acyl tRNA? The one that loads the tRNA. It's like, well, good luck with that. Thank you, Sal. Okay. You're the biochemist here. I'm just fascinated by it. After I was a chemist, but this whole biochemistry thing is like, whoa, this is really interesting. So I've been following it ever since. It's just, I don't think they have any idea of all these different things. And then, like you're saying, the regulatory stuff. So without any knowledge of that, and just looking at the chart with the bacteria going to all the whales and banana trees and all that kind of stuff, I think that's how they view it. And so they really just can't appreciate it on the same level that those of us who've actually looked into it have or do. That was my say. Go ahead, Sal.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, it seems that Sal Cordova has decided to return to the crazy world of YouTube. He disappeared.
Amen.
Nobody knew where he was. And then he comes back crowing like a rooster about his second peer-reviewed publication. Congratulations, Sal. How are you? How have you been? And tell us what's been going on with you and what was your latest publication about?
Our publication, my co-authors are Bill Basner, John Sanford, and Ola Hoscher. Ola Hoscher is a professor of mathematics and population genetics. He has 122 publications in that field. He probably knows more about the population genetic aspects of evolutionary theory than probably anyone on YouTube. So we got accepted in the math. I got the green light. I was under a gag order because we tentatively decided to be quiet about this because we're fearful of retractions. But this morning, John Sanford said, no, we're not going to play into their hands. If it's retracted, it's retracted. We're not going to be silent that we published a paper. And so I just dropped the link if people want to hear what more details about the paper. It was in a Springer Nature handbook that costs about $1,000. But the paper, I dropped some links where you can find one version of the paper on Ola Hosjer's website there. So the title of the paper was Dynamical Systems and Fitness Maximization in Evolutionary Biology. We just surveyed a lot of just the mainstream literature itself. This is not a creationist publication. We just pointed out what maybe is not, people are not aware of, to think they know evolutionary theory in terms of natural selection. I said, this is what the actual literature says. So there's no reason this paper should be retracted because it's mainstream. Our references were mainstream. There's nothing that we cited that wasn't mainstream, but there's a disconnect between the popular literature and even some of the textbooks about biology that talks about how evolution moves forward and what the elites themselves have had to say, because they're aware of the problems. And we have pointed that out. We did add novel material, particularly Bill Basner, to a 100-year-old theorem, Fisher's fundamental theorem, that didn't include mutations. And when you add mutations, if it hits a certain level, you get genetic deterioration. That was the main contribution, basically a correction to the theorem. But people have known for a while that the theorem's defunct. So I dug this out of the basement here. The champagne, because this is the best. This is probably the biggest venue I'll ever publish in.
Well, it's definitely a big one. And what I find interesting is I've been hearing ad nauseum from certain individuals who shall remain nameless that Sanford and his cohorts just don't know anything about population genetics, and that Mendel's accountant does not account for recombination. Don't know how many times I have heard that in this past couple weeks, and I'm like, for the love of all that is good and holy, have you ever actually gone and looked at the functionality of the thing that you claim it doesn't do? It's very fascinating. And then obviously doing reviews like what you're talking about, looking at, it's very kind of funny, kind of like the point of this the stream earlier, the part of the stream earlier where I'm playing in Richard Dawkins' own words, and then we're told that even if you guys doing a review of the mainstream literature, even if you quote the people who disagree with you on the macro view but agree with you on the micro view, therefore they don't mean what you say they mean, even though they said that's exactly what they mean. It's amazing how that seems to happen with these anti-theists.
We've got a professor, he won the award, the National Award in Mathematics in Ola Hosjer in Sweden. And he's a professor of population genetics. So he was one of the co-authors of this paper. I just dropped the link. I don't want, what happened, John, was I saw YouTube, as soon as I finished my stream, I noticed yours was live. I said, I'll drop in and say hi. And because we haven't seen each other in a long time. And I'm not on YouTube very much because I'm working so much now. I really miss hanging out with you guys on YouTube. I'd love to do more. I just don't have the time right now. Not to mention now that Mom's home to be with the Lord, I actually get to meet people in church and in the local area, and I get to do creationism kind of in a more brick and mortar setting than YouTube. So that's another reason you don't see me as much.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
So it's nice to see Ray
Yeah,
and
I got a real job.
Jungle. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations, Sal.
Yeah. So John Sanford and I also got reason we talked today. An editor approached us for another publication, so there might be a third peer-reviewed article coming out this year, and there are 2 other publications in the works. And now, one reason we can do that, it's nice when you have co-authors, because if you had to try to do this by yourself, like forget it, not in this environment. So you actually try to hitch your wagon to someone who actually knows what they're doing.
Well, that's understandable.
Because I looked at my co-authors. I said, I'm the dumb kid on the block, because there's Bill Basner, who's emeritus professor of mathematics. There's John Sanford, who's a famous genetic engineer. And there's Ola Hoster, who's a professor of population genetics and a award-winning mathematician. I'm the dumb kid on the block.
Well, we always have to recognize the bigger brains, right?
Yeah. So this is a real
Well, it looks
honor.
like you're having fun, though.
Yeah. So that might be the peak of my career right there, as far as the secular world, because I don't, we're worried. I am worried personally that there'll be a retraction, or that they're going to harass the editors. And I hope you'll stand up and say, well, what did they say that's wrong? There's nothing wrong with it. Everything there is referencing peer-reviewed literature.
What was the title of the paper again, Sal?
It's in the Handbook of Mathematics in the Arts and Sciences, and the chapter we wrote is Dynamical Systems and Fitness Maximization in Evolutionary Biology. And I can drop a link to the paper from Ola Hoster's website. It's a 67-page monstrosity. The book is available at Walmart for those who want to buy it for about $820.
Good Lord.
But I'm going to give let me see, ResearchGate. I'm going to give, Ola Hoster has a copy of it.
Oh man, it looks like I just Googled it. It looks like the ResearchGate's got the full PDF right now available.
Yeah. Go to Ola Hoster's website and you can find it. And you could, the guy's just, he probably has, in kind of our YouTube sphere, he probably has more publications than everyone in the YouTube sphere on the creation evolution controversy combined. He has like 120 publications.
Wow.
Yep. Well,
Yeah,
I'm an electrician. We just got a big contract. I'm an electrician now.
Oh, congratulations. I wish I could be an electrician. I could wire my own house.
Jungle, have you decided that retirement for a year was just too much? You back? Have you decided to come out of retirement?
Yeah, it's fun to work because I'm learning a lot of stuff that I didn't know about being an electrician. Yeah. So, yeah, it's good. I like it.
Well, that's good.
But I got to pay my taxes, though. That's the thing.
Well, what just happened, ladies and gentlemen, is Jungle realized that the end of civilization is on the way, and he only has one very valuable skill, and that is being a mechanic. So he said, well, the end of the world is on the way. Maybe I should get a second one, and then he can be one of the most valuable people in the state of Missouri. If he's both mechanic and electrician, that's a serious double whammy right there for the end times apocalypse.
Yep.
And Sal just dropped a link.
And we might get into solar too, maybe.
Oh, nice! You gonna get into like solar panels and like setting up solar power systems and all that.
Yeah, solar systems. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely some money in that, for sure.
Yep.
Absolutely
Yeah,
no
it
doubt
costs
about
a lot
that.
of money.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they can if you're doing like the big ones for sure. Yeah, people are paying out the wazoo for that. And those, I tell you, the most expensive part is the batteries. Those batteries are ridiculous for like the lithium.
Yeah, and you have to have a lot of them.
Oh yeah, I mean
You have
they
to
get
have a lot
drained
of
so
them for
quick.
storage. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was building out my truck,
Yep.
I was going to initially do solar, and then I was like, wait a minute, I will do solar at some point. However, I'm just going to buy a generator because I can recharge batteries in like an hour running a generator for the same amount of time it would take. Might be able to redo them, recharge over the course of the day if we had great sunlight, or run a generator for an hour and your batteries are recharged. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I just looked at my batteries right now, and they're at 53 volts, so that's good for a 48-volt system for the night to run my
Right.
refrigerator and lights and everything.
Right. Yeah, but you're not having to run AC and stuff too much
For the
right now, are
time
you?
being.
Yeah.
No, not right now, but pretty soon I'll have to do the heat pump the opposite way to heat up the office.
Right. Well, and it gets cold in Missouri. Get some snow up there, so definitely have to have some heat.
Well, last year it got down 10 below zero, which I've never seen in my life.
But it didn't get that cold in New Jersey.
So who
Or, sorry,
knows?
it didn't get that cold up north.
No, I've never seen 10 below zero. No.
Wow. Okay.
In Chicago, it got down to zero a couple of times when I was in Chicago, but I never saw 10 below zero. No.
Wow. Yeah, I remember when my sister lived in Chicago. This is probably 10 years ago, maybe. I remember going up there in the winter one time to see him, and I remember, it's kind of ironic you never saw 10 below, because I remember it being 10 below, and I walked outside, and I had multiple layers, heavy jacket, hat, scarf, the whole nine. I walked outside and was instantly frigid, and was like, okay, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, I'm not going for a walk today. And like turned around and walked back in their apartment. I'm like, this is nuts. Like, I don't mind getting down to, like 5-10 degrees. That's fine. But when it's -10, heck no. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Ask the people in Alaska, it's dangerous to walk outside.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
life-threatening.
Yeah, when it's -30 degrees and your eyeballs literally freeze together when you walk outside in like 2 seconds. I mean, come on now. That's like, I'm not trying to live up there. That's a summer only visit right there.
Yeah.
I live in California, so those kind of temperatures. I guess you could find them if you went up in the mountains somewhere. But yeah, generally speaking, it's if it hits 50 degrees, you're shivering, and if it's gets up to around 100, you're frying. You never really get used to any temperature, so unless it's pretty close to a nice 70 degrees, you're just out of luck.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been watching the weather pretty heavily this past couple of years, just for partial curiosity. And this year, at least here in Tennessee, it's been on average 4 degrees cooler this year than last year. And like, for example, and the number of days it's been cooler has been kind of interesting too. So like last year in August, there were, I believe, 13 days where the temperature was above 93 degrees here in Nashville. This year, it was 4. And then above like 87 degrees, I forget the exact numbers, but it was significant. It was like 7 and then 1, like vice versa, right? And I'm like, okay, so I'm being told it's getting hotter, but if you go and look at the numbers, it's getting cooler. And it's been this way every month this year. It's been on average 4 degrees cooler than it was last year. And I'm like, so we keep talking about how we're freaking out about like a one, if it goes up half of a degree, it's the end of the world. I'm like, it's 4 degrees cooler this year. Like, so we be worrying about the fact that it's 4 degrees cooler? We're freaking out about 1 degree hotter or half a degree hotter. And what about the 4 degrees cooler? What does that tell you, folks? Like, are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard.
Well,
I
they were
remember seeing
saying
some
that
stuff. Oh, go ahead.
they were saying that we're going into a mini ice age, and it turns out that they were correct about that.
Yeah, that's what they
Apparently.
were saying in the 70s. You know, it's like, oh yes, there's going to be another ice age, and then they changed it to global warming, and now they just call it climate change.
Yeah, but what we're talking about now, I agree with you. I know.
Yeah.
A sidebar. Do you guys remember? Oh crap, I'm drawing a blank. You're from California. You'll probably remember this, Ray. Ray, who was the guy who was governor twice? He was governor back in the 70s, and then
Jerry Brown.
Yeah, there we go. Did
Yeah.
you see his speech that he did about climate change in his second tenure as governor, and how they not figuratively but literally just swapped ice age and global cooling, all that stuff, for global warming, and it was a verbatim speech?
Oh wow, no, I missed that. Although I did notice that when Al Gore was running around and he went to I can't remember, like Denmark or something like that, to have a global warming thing. They had like the biggest ice snow storm ever, and it was totally unseasonable, and that kind of stuff happened quite a bit to him. So I think sometimes maybe it was God having a sense of humor.
Yeah, it's amazing how these people. I mean, what was the one where it started snow? It was in Mexico, and it started snowing. Like as Al Gore arrived on his plane, it started snowing in Mexico. for one of their. I forget which one. This is probably like 10 years ago. I remember seeing that and I just started busting out laughing. I'm like, it's snowing in Mexico when Al Gore arrives for a global warming conference. Like, you can't make this up. As you said, God just having a sense of humor. I'm like, you cannot make this up. But in context of the whole like going into the ice age, it's the Maunder minimum. That's what we're coming at you. And by the way, paper right now, I just Googled it, published March 9th, 2021. Gradual onset of the Maunder minimum revealed by high precision carbon-14 analysis. So yeah, we're going into it. And
yeah,
they've been claiming it's and here's the thing that really has pissed me off about a lot of this debates on the topic is I remember in the late 2000s where I remember seeing different articles being published by scientists talking about the fact that, hey, we're overdue for the next Maunder minimum. It's coming. We're seeing the signals. And then, on the same day, there would be a publication from the UN. I'm drawing a blank on what the acronym is for that little group, but their climate change committee would publish an article. We should be freaking out. This is the end of the world if we don't stop X, Y, Z. And I'm like, I just finished reading an article from like solar experts talking about how we're going into a solar reduction, and it's going to get colder. And then you guys are publishing the literal opposite of this on the same freaking day. Like, are you kidding me? Like, either one of y'all is either full of crap or you're both full of crap, but you can't both be right, and fast forward to now, it's like, oh, well, let's announce the fact that, yes, it is happening. And then we have politicians on the flip side talking about how we need to implement carbon credits and carbon credit limitations, all that kind of stuff, while we're guaranteed to be going into a like dramatically cooler period for like, who knows? It could be 10, it could be like 70 years, like the last one. Just saying.
Yeah, and the idea that the political class
Professor
could
Dave.
actually do something about the temperature is funny too.
Yeah, Professor Dave or somebody was saying that the Electric Universe people, they're like a cult or something. I was watching something like that, but then they're the ones that had the prediction of the going into the mini ice age and the solar minimum and all that stuff. They're talking about that. So they were the ones that are correct, and the other ones are the ones that are wrong.
Yeah, so says something good. Perhaps I sound stupid, but what if warming the planet would be a good thing? I have asked that same question. When you think about it from what is the temperate zone? And one of the things we hear ad nauseum about the growing population is that we're not going to have enough land area for either us to live and or be able to grow food to feed all of us, right? I'm like, okay, let's think about that. So if you expanded the temporal climate zone, then you might be able to melt some of the tundra and you'd have basically untouched soil, or soil that's been untouched for quite some time to be able to grow stuff in. Or you might be able to do what? Have multiple growing cycles inside of the same time frame versus having a much shorter period of time in which you can grow stuff. Which, like, look at the tropics. Things produce multiple times a year. I remember also go back to like the nutrition of the soil. Like I remember in England, where I grew up, because of the Gulf Stream and because of how fertile the soil was in the fens, in the same field, the farmers would be able to get like 2 different crops in the same field. And you don't even
the
have
CO2 would help. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
but
you're right.
CO2
You're right.
and love it.
That's very true.
Yeah, of course.
But who knows? Hey, man, if humans don't know the answer to everything, therefore, it must not be part of any kind of larger system that we haven't figured out yet.
Hey.
It's a political agenda.
And I tell you what, those electrical universe people, man, some of their videos are epic. And a couple months ago, I got emails from somebody who claimed the electric universe was true and that he was Gabriel. Not just his name was Gabriel, but he was the Gabriel. And that he had messages for me of what was needed to happen next. And that God was actually a ball of energy, of electrical energy. And that he was beyond our understanding. I'm like, well, I agree with you on that one, but I'm not sure about this. I don't know if you're Gabriel, because it seems kind of weird that you're emailing me right now.
I think that's a medical condition that I'm very familiar with.
What's up, Danny? Welcome to the stream.
And I don't think people.
Hey guys. Hey,
I don't
Sal,
think people even believe me when I say that.
Hi, Danny.
Sorry,
Yeah, hi Danny. I've been busy. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, I've been busy, but somehow I've been wasting tons of time. I don't know how those two go together, but I managed to do it.
So, Danny, have you heard back from your interview?
The interview?
I mean, the other night you said your room was clean because you had an interview.
Oh, I had one earlier that day. I was talking with Christian Idealism. Do you know who that is?
Oh, okay. You were doing like a YouTube interview, not a.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, that wasn't clear. Yeah, I went on some Christian apologetics. They invited me there, and we talked about. It wasn't a debate per se, but we just talked about metaphysics. I talked about metaphysics with another Christian, a Catholic, who's an idealist. But that's why I cleaned my bed.
Gotcha. Well,
now I'm in my office, so.
Right on.
Yeah, but I'm actually, you know who Dr. Joshua Rasmussen is?
Yeah.
I'm talking to him in 2 weeks. I'm excited. He's one of the good ones. I really like Dr. Joshua Rasmussen.
He's very interesting. I mean, he's a very brilliant man. I've read some of his papers.
Oh yeah, on what? What did you?
It was a while ago. Let me get him somewhere. I've got him somewhere. I'll see if I can pull him up.
Did you know he's a kind of universalist?
I did, actually. Yeah, he's an interesting character. Yeah, I mean, I thought, sidebar, somebody else you should try and talk to. Let me see if I can figure out what his name is. Have you ever, I've mentioned this to you before a while ago. Have you ever read on the post-mortem opportunity?
No, I haven't.
Let's see. It is written by Dr. James Bellaby. It's the post-mortem opportunity, a biblical and theological assessment of salvation after death.
James who?
James Bellaby. I'll send you a link to it.
Okay.
I forget where I first came across him. He did an interview with somebody, but it was, I'm drawing a blank right now who it was. But I was supposed to link to his book in the main chat. But it's a very interesting premise of basically not universalism, but basically what if in the moment between life and death, because we don't actually know what that is, right? If in that moment we are basically given the opportunity to reconcile, if you will, and if that is the case, then basically it eliminates a lot of the standard objections that are put forth of, from the atheist, well, both on the atheist side as well as different theist sides, but mostly on the atheist side of, a lot of the very common ones too, of like, well, what about the guy in Africa, and who never heard, is he going to hell, and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, well, you have to look at it from this perspective. If, let's say, God gives everybody the opportunity, ultimately, and in that context, you're given the opportunity not just from a knowledge, being told by a fellow human perspective, but you're now being presented the case by God himself, right? And then you have the opportunity.
The way I understood that when I was a Christian is I didn't pay it much attention because I understood that God was to be understood as just, and so I didn't know how, but like the point is that, and I don't want to think of it just in terms of this kind of strict divine command theory, just defining whatever happens as just. I think it was a little bit more deeper than that. It was like, okay, well, God's going to give him the opportunity, or he's just, he's not going to punish someone on the basis that they failed with respect to an imperative they could not achieve, because I think that this is the Kantian notion of like ought implies can. Like if I tell you you should like feed all the starving people in the world, that it doesn't seem like that imperative is true, because you can't do that. That's not feasible for you. You don't know how to do that. And so I just understood that God would have that understanding where if a human has an imperative to believe in him, that it's possible, right? It's feasible for them to do that.
Well, no, I agree with you on that. And that's one of the interesting points that's addressed, right, in the postmortem opportunity, which I think is interesting. And also, Patrick's kind of put some stuff up there about NDEs becoming very interesting. And like I've just finished another book on the topic, and I find NDEs and OBEs and shared death and all that kind of stuff to be extraordinarily fascinating, because the data is just blowing up. It's just gigantic what is having to be addressed, but with all this stuff. And in some ways it's not debunking Christianity by any stretch of the or religion in general by any stretch, or God by any stretch of the imagination. It's reinforcing it, while it is threatening to some of the more dogmatic talking points. It does nothing but reaffirm the premise that there is something beyond this existence, and more to the cosmos, if you will, than this finite frame of reference that we have. And I find it kind of interesting
you know
how many.
what the disciples said. What the disciples said to Jesus, they said, "Well, then who can be saved?" So it was not like something that they could grasp, the idea of anybody being saved, when he talked about the rich man not being able to enter.
Right.
But
Yeah,
then
there's
there's
definitely more
the
to
other
it.
thing of there's the other thing of what do I mean, the way you are acting here on earth right now is probably an indication of how you'll react to God, like you say, after death.
Well, maybe, but you also have to look at it from the perspective that, you know, all these people are having NDEs that might be hardcore atheists and then are having 180-degree shifts in their worldview after they recover.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
if
that
they do,
trend,
sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Yeah.
well, I mean, I agree with you. There's sometimes they don't, but I'm saying they're more likely to. The data shows they're more likely to do a complete paradigm shift. Now, they might. That doesn't mean they're going to become advocates for some specific religion, but they stop fearing death, and the vast majority of them recognize that there is some higher power, and you know those are the two main points. And like their fear of death vanishes, and the realization that there's something beyond this life becomes definite. And that's something that I think is very interesting. And more importantly, from the atheist theist perspective, is, in my opinion, that dramatically weakens the atheist position, especially if you're like Danny and you're a dualist. Then to me, that's a rather gigantic dagger to the atheist position. What say you, Danny?
Yeah, a lot of people think that. I think there is like some like intuition there that I have. Like, so there's like a weird sort of agreement that like I was talking to one of my philosophy friends. He has a PhD from St. Louis, very brilliant. His name is JC. And we were arguing about physicalism because he's a staunch physicalist. And this guy's like much more brilliant than I am. And we were talking about it, and I was just like wondering how he could believe or take the position that he's just molecules. And then he's like, I don't get it. If I were you, if I had your view, I would just believe in God, right? Like what's you're just taking one extra step. Like it's like, because and we talked about it because there is something weird about atheistic dualism, right? Where there's not a really good explanation for why things would be so regular with respect to the behaviors that follow our intentions. So, very simple example, I want to scratch my back, and what happens is that my arm goes back and scratches it, and that pretty much happens 100% of the time I intend to scratch my back. And what does this show is that, well, it shows a kind of regularity where like could be explained given the regularity of the laws of nature, right? Like you have laws of nature that explains all sorts of regularities in nature. But if there's no regular laws presiding over your intentions and various physical states, then there's not really a good reason for why when I intend to scratch my back, I instead jump, right? On a physicalist picture, the reason why when I intend to, under these conditions, intend to scratch my back and my hand then scratches my back, that there's sort of laws of these brain states, right? They have causal dispositions, and that invokes like physical laws, right? I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense, but the point is that on theism, it feels more comfortable because God could kind of preside over what sort of success or failure occurs after we intend to do something. At least that's his view, and I think there might be some problems there, but I definitely can see the intuition. You know, yeah, but I mean, it's something that I've thought about a little bit, but I don't really. I think that it gets into some philosophy theory that I don't find terribly convincing for the average person, and it's like one of those things where I'm like satisfied, in just biting the bullet and saying, well, there's not really good explanations, kind of some kind of brute contingency. But I think it rests. My view does rest. It might rest more comfortably in theism.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of the staunch physicalism at this point. I don't know if have you ever read Beyond Physicalism?
No. One day I'm going to say yes. You're going to find something that I've read. I mean, like everything. I guess we should just assume that I haven't read what you've looked into. I feel bad every time.
Well, what's funny is like Beyond Physicalism, the guys that wrote it, they're not theists, right? They're just being like physicalism is dumb, basically, and they're scientists. They're not like just philosophers. They're like,
oh, okay, yeah,
and just completely annihilating the whole premise of physicalism.
Yeah, I'm reading this book right now for my graduate. My graduate coursework is focused on philosophy of mind, naturalism, physicalism. Like I'm interested in that. And this philosopher, he's an atheist, like Daniel Stoljar. He tried, like half the book is dedicated to what even is physicalism in the first place. And every time he defines it, he's like, well, no, that leads to bad consequences. This leads to bad consequences. Like he calls it the interpretation problem, that there's like, when you try to interpret what the thesis is, you just get into all sorts of counter examples and issues, and so it becomes an uninterpretable position. So I know people, for instance, that like Detroyer, you debated Detroyer. Do you know who that is? He was this red maple leaf that you debated on Modern Day Debate, but he thinks
I did.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Randolph Richardson? Oh, Detroit. Oh yeah. Okay. It was a tag team, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Detroyer.
Yeah. I know
think that mental states are brain states, but he does not subscribe to physicalism, which is interesting because he doesn't even know how to articulate the thesis. So that's an interesting objection that I'm reading, is that people are just having a hard time understanding what naturalism or physicalism is even supposed to be. Because every time you try to define it, there's just bad consequences to it.
Right. Well, to me, I mean, in my opinion, if you actually use your brain, or in this context, your mind, the either idealism or dualism are the only things that make sense. The other, it's like, I just like solipsism, like, yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and just dismiss that one out of hand because that doesn't make any sense. The pure physicalism, not really buying into it because I mean, the more I contemplate the whole premise of my first person point of view and the hard problem of consciousness, I'm like, how do you escape this? That doesn't make any, especially what really gets me is the more that we discover and learn about biological systems, the hard, in my opinion, in spite of the, we hear this ad nauseum that, oh, we're explaining consciousness. I'm like, no, we're not. We're actually getting further away from explaining consciousness. It's like, yeah, we're seeing the end outcome of different things, but none of it's explaining consciousness. And it's actually kind of ironic. In the ebook I finished recently, one of the things the author gets into, is basically debunking the standard talking points that we hear ad nauseum from the folks who are claiming that we're understanding consciousness. Yeah, the whole like, oh well, it's just reduction, it's hallucinations or whatever, right? In terms of, near-death experience. Well, turns out we're not seeing the right type as the research goes on. well, we actually had a reduced oxygen state, not a heightened oxygen state. We actually had a reduction in brain activity, not an increase in brain activity. Like they're seeing all these different things that the absolute polar opposite of the claims that are made by folks on YouTube. I'll put it that way. They're supposed to explain consciousness.
I think also people don't realize that everyone talks like dualists. Everyone talks like dualists. The way they use physical, like, are you in physical pain, right? Or I'm physically here, mentally not here. You know, I'm okay physically, you know, that kind of thing. They talk like there's a dichotomy. And then you can always be like a smart ass, and I don't do it, but like, oh, are you saying that, like, if you think on my brain, you think mental pain is also physical, right? So you're just like, it's just either the idea is that the view, I think, is tracking the way that what we mean when we're going around talking to each other and communicating, right? I think, I don't think people realize that, right? Once you really apply the terms to your language, there's so much breaks apart if you just kind of eliminate or reduce mental to the physical.
Yeah, it's a like I really don't understand why. I mean, obviously, if you're searching for the truth, you want to find out if it's true or not. But given the kind of the points you just made, right? Like, why are some people so desperate for that not to be true? Right, that the actual the separation actually is true. And
I think there might be, I think you already know this, but like there might be some kind of like, I mean, science has done excellent things for us. I mean, look at us right now. Technology, I mean, like the progress of science is just insane, right? At least it seems that way to me. And I think then there's that comes with this societal attitude that science can just solve everything, that science is the answer to everything because it's a solution to our problems and stuff like that, right? And I will admit that the philosophers have always lagged behind in terms of similar kind of progress. There are no, I've said this multiple times to Sal, there are no established facts in philosophy, right? And all that means is that philosophers are not going to take seriously a consensus or any kind of established agreement on any position, right? Every position is evaluated equally in the literature. You have a huge, like a majority in philosophy is like 60 to 70%, 80 and 90% is incredible. It's incredible majority. And even then that's not enough to establish facts in philosophy. So I'm just saying that, like, there is something special about science in terms of that insane progress over the last 300, 400 years. And I think that has something to do with our society to just want to naturalize everything,
No, it's a very fair point. But I also think the part you're leaving out is if dualism is true, then naturalism being the explanation for everything is a very weak position.
Yeah, I think that's actually...
And if it's a weak position, then what is the more rational conclusion? And obviously not the only, but the giant elephant in the room is going to be that there must be an external agent. I mean, it's kind of an unavoidable conclusion if naturalism is false. I think so. I mean, do you not think so? I mean, okay, if naturalism is not does not account for all of the known variables, and the known variables
existence
indicate a necessity of an intelligent agent, then
can you repeat that part?
Okay, if it is not rational for naturalism to account for certain variables, right, then what does account for them?
Yeah, I mean, they're various
you're only
things.
You're only left with one basic conclusion, right? I mean,
But
I'm sure
I think
somebody
they're
can always
actually,
come up with a hypothetical, but I'm saying there's only one rational conclusion.
well, I think there are like probably 3 other ontologies, non-natural ontologies. I think they're numbers, and numbers don't need explanations. I think they're necessary, abstract. I think they're propositions. I also think that there's something called value properties, right? Those are not mental phenomena, and they're not physical phenomena either. And then, of course, you have the mental properties, which I don't take to be non-natural. So there's 4 various ontologies, 2 of which don't need explanation by definition, given that they're abstract. So what you're saying is that value properties and mental states require further explanation for their existence. And what we do know, though, is that the mental and the physical do interact. Right? After all, my intention to snap my fingers, that requires my mental state to interact with some physical state in my hand. So I don't see why the reverse is not. Well, of course the reverse is true. I can drink alcohol, and the alcohol is going to affect my mind. So there is an interaction between a material thing and an immaterial concrete object. That's to say, an immaterial thing that can engage in cause-effect relationships. So, and I guess you're saying that if there's non-natural causation, that's going to be explained by other non-natural causation that's going to require a mind. But if it's the case that there's interaction, then I don't think that we can just definitively say that it's that to explain these sort of non-natural phenomena that we need to appeal to some overall fundamental non-natural phenomena like a mind.
There's also interactions between, say, like music and wanting to dance, and music isn't a chemical. It's a vibration in the air, I suppose you could say. But there's that kind of interaction too. Just throwing my 2 cents in.
I don't. Yeah, that's another thing is that I don't even know if music is reducible. I don't think music is reducible to physical states. I think it might be. You might, maybe you might think that it has the sort of relation like the Supreme Court has with like there being, organisms and buildings, right? Like that seems like but I'm saying like the Supreme Court is not usually characterized as like physical. In the same way that I don't think music is going to be considered physical. Like, how do you distinguish? Like, here's the question: How do you distinguish music and sound, or noise, rather? I think that's a very difficult question.
That would be the spiritual. Well, that's the spiritual part of music is the making a distinction between noise and music. That would be the difference between the physical and the spiritual. Pretty much. Except that the Bible says to make a noise to the Lord.
You know who I'm interviewing tomorrow?
No, but I know what you're saying.
Or Friday. I'm interviewing that Nicholson guy that they like to read on Speed's channel. I'm talking. He's a professional philosopher of biology, and I'm going to be talking. I already told here the topic, so I'm going to talk to him about. Let's see, philosophy of science, biological kinds, biology kinds of machines, like is the cell a machine, function in biology, which he takes a view on function. I'm interested. I'm going to talk to him about intelligent design and creationism, but he seems like a nice guy. That's going to be on Friday at 6 p.m.
Well, that's interesting.
It's all directed.
Hey, real quick, guys. So, Redefine Living just sent this to me. He's uploaded this. I'm going to play it real quick since this did start off with a review of a Dawkins interview. Let's see what this is real short. Let's see what he says.
That's the old one, isn't it?
Can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Can you just stop on it? I think.
Well,
Sal,
I guess
Nicholson went.
You sent that to him?
That's cool that Nicholson and you went to the same school.
No, he's a professor at the school I graduated from.
Oh,
George Mason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I graduated there.
Nice, nice.
About 20 years ago.
But he wasn't there. He's young, so he probably wasn't there when you were. Not
Yeah.
that you're old. Yeah, but
not that I endorse Nicholson's views. I think
can you
they're
tell
terrible.
me? Can you
I
tell me
think
a
they're
little bit about
terrible.
his views? Can you tell me a little bit about his views? Because I read a
If
little
he's
bit.
the
But
one who's advocating that cells aren't machines, I just wanted to say, dude, do you even read the own textbooks in your own school? Because that's the prevailing viewpoint. I mean, you want to make a philosophical argument, fine, but the machine paradigm it's a pretty good metaphor. And I don't see why you'd want to undo it, except just because of a philosophical bias.
Right. I think
I'll talk
Sygart
about
made a
that.
very good point. He's made this point multiple times, but he made a conversation with me a couple weeks ago that basically the philosophers, the philosophy of science, philosophy of biology, whatever this guy is, they are only looking at things from the ontological ramifications and so on and so forth, but are ignoring the accepted, the point you made, Sal, like ignoring the accepted position in the scientific journals. And he kind of made it because where it came up from was some guy on Twitter was going on a diatribe about the genetic code was not a code. And he's like, yes, I have sources. And he sent Sygart a link that supposedly proved his point, right? And then Cy responds back, oh, that's from a philosophy journal, not a scientific journal. And was just basically like, get out of town, man. Like, I don't care about your philosophy citation.
Oh, man, we get a little too much hate from the.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I'm sorry, Danny.
Danny, it's not about the debunking philosophy. It's debunking or just dismissing the premise of a philosopher telling the scientist what is correct about their own
Well,
discipline.
I just did that to Dr. Dan Cardinal on Twitter yesterday, and Dr. Dan is not happy. You got really sassy with me.
Real quick, guys. So, you got a new person who's joined the stream. What's up, Jimmy? How are you?
Hey, pretty good, man. Been enjoying this session. I'm glad. Like, I know you said in the pin message you can end it soon. So if I can even be part of it after the discussion, that'd be awesome.
Oh, what? Yeah, we've been. I mean, I was going to end it, and then we're not ending it because people joined. So, what? Anything sticking out to you? Anything you want to jump into the conversation? Anything that's been kind of sticking out to you?
Yes. Yeah, I've been interested in your position for a long time. I consider myself a theist as well. And, but I, of course, various theists seem to have a different understanding how they understand, religion, God, or even these like scientific terms that we use and these metaphors and or philosophical terms like you mentioned dualism. I was going to mention that in a sort of more esoteric area of Christianity. I don't know if you ever study Christian mysticism or in Eastern philosophy, which is referred to as non-dualism. A term that sort of fuses the two of this subject-object dichotomy we find in dualism. And I don't know if you ever heard descriptions in Eastern philosophy, but they say the mind is more like a whirlpool rather than something people consider themselves a static person. I'm this person. This is my name. This is, they find this like a static identity, whereas in Eastern philosophy, you're more regarded as something akin to a whirlpool, where every moment in the whirlpool, there's always different energy flowing through it. It's never the same at any point, like the Greek philosopher who said you can never step into the same river twice. And so the idea in Eastern philosophy is that all things run through it. That if, in a sense, you are a whirlpool where in which the entire universe comes at a single point, and you define this with the energy that runs through your body, and people fight between the identity, like am I the body, or whereas Eastern philosophy is kind of saying no, you're the entire works. You are all things running through this single point. And so, if you reduce it to yourself, you're going to reduce it to the body. But if you see it as it's seen in I think religion, not just Eastern philosophy, but they see it as a unity, a divine unity amongst all things at the center of your consciousness.
No, it's a very interesting point, and it, as we were kind of discussing earlier about the whole aspect of the the near-death experiences. I would say that some of the things that are reported back by people, assuming they're true, would kind of lend credence to the point you're making. Not to the extent that we don't have individuality and there isn't a sense that self is not actually real in terms of this being both part of and separate from, right?
Sure. Yes.
But a lot of these people talk about like the feeling of unity, right? And the joining of, they still maintain their sense of identity, but simultaneously there's other folks who talk about for a portion of their experience, they felt like they were one with something, right? And then they step out of it, not step out of it, but they like kind of coalesce, might be a good word, back into their individual self, right? And they're now encapsulating their sense of self, I guess, maybe. And
yes, exactly.
But still have the capacity to join and merge as well. And that, to me, that's something that I've always found interesting in the context of, like from a Christian perspective, this whole premise of the Trinity is a very, just to be blunt, for all the idiots who run around claiming that like, oh, we totally understand the Trinity. It's like, yeah, well, given the fact that we don't have the capacity to currently merge our sense of self with another person, we don't actually understand what the hell the Trinity is. We have ideas about what it would be and what it could potentially entail and constitute of, but we don't truly comprehend what that is. Assuming it's true, we don't actually know what it really is because we don't have the capacity to truly comprehend it, right? But I think some of these things that I bring in, like the NDE experiences, like start to create some semblance of like kind of a glimpse into what that could potentially constitute. And anyway, enough of my rambling there. But Danny, actually, anybody else in the room have any thoughts on what we're discussing right now?
No, I wanted to add something to that really quick, if I may. But that's precisely what I'm referring to. And I think when you said there's portions of their memory where they have this, profound experience that they can recall, I would relate it to what in psychology is referred to as ego death. This is where the sense of your ordinary self is completely gone. And, Carl Jung called it a psychic death. This is what I'm referring to, and not by non-dualism, this kind of collapse of the subject-object dichotomy, where you experience in ordinary consciousness, whereas in these mystical states or in these near-death states, that's no longer there. I really truly believe that's the true meaning of nirvana. To blow out the ego, the candle is the ego is the candle, the flame, and it is described as kind of death and rebirth, and I think it is related to the Trinity. I think the Trinity is kind of a comment on the nature of that phenomenon, and at least that's my take. That's all I wanted to add. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I do relate these near-death experiences to what mystics report and mystical experience.
Yeah, one of my biggest issues with modern Christianity is I'm not saying that there isn't that doctrines are false by any stretch of the imagination. My argument is that there is more to existence and doctrine and such than what we understand, right? And it's like, so like basically I kind of view the Bible as an example as the gateway of knowledge and the starting point, but not the end of all that is. And it's like, as Paul says, for now I see through a glass darkly, but then face to face, right? And multiple times basically puts forth that there is so much more to existence than what we currently experience, and that he's only had a glimpse himself, but knows that there is more. And but then on the flip side, especially in like modern quote unquote religion, we're being told that like there is nothing more, right? Not necessarily like, oh, there will be more existence, but there couldn't be anything possibly that hasn't been told us to it, that we haven't already had. Like everything's been outlined for us. We know exactly what everything's going to be like. And I'm like, how do you come to that conclusion? If you actually read the Bible and you come to the conclusion that there's nothing more to be told, well, there's multiple instances where the prophets are told, don't tell this, like seal this up and don't write it down. By definition, that means that there's more that has not yet been revealed, just by definition of being told, don't show this. And anyway,
if man, one more comment on that I would love to make, because I love that point. And I would say this, I think the biggest criticism today by a lot of theologians, a lot of people I've been listening to, they say that Christianity has become dried up of spirituality. And the reason I mentioned this Christian mysticism, because this is more towards the core of Christianity. And, I hear atheists making, like, they would make fun of, like, the early theologians, like, why would they wear these ornate, costumes or whatever, like, in a very kind of derogatory manner. But they were, I think, in my opinion, the early theologians, the early mystics, they honed these type of spiritual experiences. And, that was the more to them, not only scripture, but reality itself. And I think today, what you find in like churches, people don't go to churches to have, spiritual experiences or mystical experiences. They go to churches to study the scripture and so forth, and or to commune and things like this. It's not to, I think, because spirituality is dried up, that's why you see people kind of leaving the church to go to India, to go to the ashram with the yogis, or they'll go to South America to try ayahuasca with the shamans. You find this sort of thing. And I think it's because spirituality has been dried up in the religion. I mean, that, I don't know, that's my last comment.
Yeah, I don't think that everybody does that. Maybe some do, but not everybody.
Some do. Not everybody. Yeah, with the time it was really prevalent, I think, is during the 60s, when people were actually getting accidentally dosed with LSD or something, and when they wanted to understand their experience, Christianity was helping them. And I think that's why they maybe went to India with the yogis to try to understand what Brahman means, for instance, to help them understand what they went through. And of course today it's not as common, but yeah, I mean, people still, I live in.
Jimmy, what's ironic is I agree with you that a lot of that started in the 60s, obviously, with everybody tripping balls on PCP and LSD. There's no doubt about it. But I say something that's very interesting in the.
Yeah, they weren't Christian.
No, but I tell you something that's very interesting in the context of that, in relation to this mind-body problem. And Danny, you might find this interesting. Danny, are you familiar with the filter hypothesis?
No.
That basically it's that the brain is the filter, and
you refer to Aldous Huxley's Mind at Large, or he did call the brain a filter. Our brains are filtering reality as we speak.
Correct, and it's basically like our eyes and our brain is it's the radio dial, if you will. It's being able to, that's filtering out everything except for what we're seeing in this current frame of reference, right? But one of the things that's been being put forth in some of the experiments that are being done on near-death experiences and just like mind-body problems in general is like, so one of the ones I was looking into, they were talking about how they're coming to the conclusion that ketamine is basically release. The theory is that it's releasing the brain, releasing the mind from the filter of the brain. And basically allowing it to break free, if you will, and then be able to and the irony is that they're actually seeing a dramatic decline in brain activity, but a crazy spike in the realness, if you will, of the experiences that are being had by the individuals that are taking part in the experiments. So they're having some of the most vivid experiences while all of the sensors say that their brains are basically not doing anything.
Oh yeah, S.J. Thomason did a video earlier on that, like on near-death experiences, and she was saying that these people who have these reports, they call it the most real experience, bar none. That this reality, when they return to it, it's, seems like the unreality.
Right.
And
They think that the one we're in is not the real one.
yeah, I know that
This is the fake one. And
that
I'd say,
doesn't.
as somebody who has, I mean, I've taken part in some of the crazy stuff in my younger days. And I mean, when the dog on your dog's biscuit box starts talking to you and comes alive, things are weird. I mean, it's like, it's so far out, man. Like the stuff that becomes alive and those things you're seeing, it's like, holy crap. And I tell
Yeah,
you what, and now I will never ever do it again, because the last one I did, which I will never, like, there's a reason I will never do it again, is because it was the most terrified I've ever been in my entire life. I mean, I remember vividly looking out my window, and it appeared to me that the entire world was melting. I mean, I was seeing, it was like something out of a movie,
yeah,
but even more vivid, of like the ground cracking, lava coming up, all this kind of stuff. And then I would like roll over back into bed and curl up, and then I would lose touch with reality, right? And I would forget that I was on a crazy experience, right? And then be terrified. Look, I thought the world was coming to an end, right? And about once every 30, 40 minutes, I would have a brief glimpse, and I would snap, like, not come back to complete reality, but I would remember, like, oh, wait, I just have to hold on, and eventually this will wear off and I'll come back to normal. And the irony is, I vividly remember those moments, right, of like realizing that this was not real. And anyway, very long story short,
So, John,
the
what what you're describing is what it's like for a person who's schizophrenic, and except that it doesn't go away. It's 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it doesn't go away. It won't go away. But it's
well,
yeah, I
basically
do
the
think
same
that.
thing.
well, I believe you, Jungle, and that's the thing that I've actually made this postulation before. Of, I honestly wonder how many, like, are you actually nuts, right, and having problems, or is the filter, like the dial, being
Yeah,
played with, right? And you're not necessarily crazy, right? And here's part of the reason I say that. It's like, so when I had my tourist business, right, I was often interacting with, I had a lot of time for like people observation, right, and interact with a whole crap load of people. But late night, when all the drunk, like the homeless drunks and stuff, come out, the people that were supposedly just messed up, right? Some of them were, jacked up on drugs, but others, they weren't, and yet they were having the most vivid conversations with things that weren't there, right? And I'm just like, okay, there's being jacked up on drugs, and I mean, I've been there, done that, I've seen it. Like, I understand where some of that comes from, but the level of vividness of their interactions, I'm like, ah, I honestly wonder if there's
You-
something that there that's there that I'm not seeing, that they are seeing, right? And they're
Yeah,
trying
but
to.
it's not real. It's not real though, John, because I've been there. I know it's not real. I mean, even the stuff that I believed was real and true, I had to not believe it was real, because even though it was so convincing that I was able to, you know, read people's minds and put thoughts into their mind and actually speak and communicate to people, by telepathy, back and forth. It seemed so real to me, but I had to like reject it and say, no, that's not true, for the sake of my own sanity. And that's the only way I became back to normal, or came back to normal.
Well, no, I get that you had to come back to normal. I'm saying that the point I'm making is that I agree with the current limitations that are placed on us. Being able to do that would make you have like you. That's the only way to regain your sanity.
No,
I agree with that. I agree with you on that.
I see your point. Terrence McKenna made this comment. He said, you know, the schizophrenic in our society is someone who's disdained in a way. You know, they're marginalized. They're told that they can't they can't hold a job or something. You know, they can't accomplish this or that. Whereas if you go to like a shamanistic society or you know, one of these indigenous tribes, the person who would be so-called schizophrenic here is actually nurtured. They're told, "Oh, you will succeed. You will lead our people." You know, they're nurtured in a different way. And I think maybe that's the one issue might be is how schizophrenics are treated in our society. You know, they're regarded as crazy people already. You know, and
Yeah,
yeah.
but you have to understand. You have to understand one thing is that they are speaking gibberish. They are seeing things that aren't there, and they
Yeah,
are
no,
believing things that aren't true.
I think you must miss the point, man. I think what LP is trying to say is that I think one misconception a lot of atheists have, because when they say consciousness is generated by the brain, they always refer to like, well, if I get your brain and if I get you hit you with the hammer, you're gonna go unconscious, you know, or if I cause brain damage to you, your personality is gonna be completely different. And they'll say things like this, but what the whole point they're missing is what LPP said earlier, the analogy of the radio. Consciousness, or if the brain is more something like the antenna of a radio, and consciousness is more like a signal, and that there's a whole other implications that can occur. So if you destroy the radio, of course the signal is not going to come in how it usually does. It's going to look exactly identical to what the atheist is trying to describe with his analogy of the, you know, consciousness is generated by the brain. They're going to look identical, you know. So it's again, we have this difference in terminology of metaphor that we can't get across to each other. They won't accept the metaphor of DNA being structured as code, because they won't accept that it's a form of type of intelligence they can attribute to anything divine. You know.
So what's that got to do with people seeing things that aren't there and believing things that aren't true?
The schizophrenic may share a reality with us, but it may just be a little off kilter when it comes to how the signal comes.
But it's not, what I'm trying to convey to you, it's not a reality. It's an imagination.
Define reality.
It's an illusion, a delusion.
Define
the reality is
hang on one second.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. We have a creator, and it's only our creator that can save us, that can recreate us.
How do you know? How do you know all signals are not coming from the creator? All signals are coming from the creator. How can you deny the schizophrenic their reality?
Because there's no power that does not come from God, that is not from God. And I know, I've been there. I'm trying to tell you, I was schizophrenic, and I know that what I was seeing and believing wasn't true, wasn't real. That's why I had to, rewire
and why do you
my
believe
brain.
what you see right now is true?
Because it is true that you have a creator, and he's the only one that can save us, and forgive us and save us.
All right, fair enough.
That is the only that's the only absolute truth that there is. There is no other absolute truth.
I'll agree. I'll agree with you. Thanks for sharing.
Hey, Sal,
Sure.
you had turned on your camera a couple
thanks
times.
for listening. A lot of people don't listen.
No, I'm glad you brought up
schizophrenia. What?
No, I was saying, so you had turned on your camera a couple times. I didn't know if you had something you wanted to. If there's
something. Oh no, I just have it off because I'm eating.
Okay.
I just was letting you know I'm here. That's
no. Okay, cool. No, reason I said that sometimes when you'll turn it off and then you hear something you want to jump in real quick and you'll like turn on your camera real quick, and I didn't know if that you had something you would add. No worries.
But while I'm here, Are you back to streaming again? You took a long break, and are you kind of back into making regular shows?
Yeah, I mean, I have more time than I did before, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll be doing it to the same extent that I was, but I may. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But yeah, I'm having some more fun again, and yeah, getting. I mean, what can I say? The Evos just keep doing things that make it unavoidable to just gotta. I'll put it this way: all of the Evo atheists can thank Jeffrey Williams for pissing me off enough to getting back into this madness.
Oh yeah,
and just I still haven't gotten over that. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, Jeffrey Williams, the moron who I debated on S.J. Thompson's channel, who claims that I did not explain that I didn't know the difference between the genetic code, DNA, and what was that thing? What was the other term? The genome. And after I explained it to him almost perfectly from a definition perspective, continued to claim I didn't know what I was talking about. And then proceeded to call me a con man, a fast talking salesman, a straw man advocate, and a plethora of other insults. And to this day, continues to claim this on YouTube, or on YouTube and also on Twitter. He pissed me off to such an extent that now it's my mission to. I'll put it this way, folks. Jeffrey Williams is now my new godless engineer. I'll put you that way. And so the rest of the atheists who I annihilate can blame Jeffrey Williams for my reemergence. Godless Engineer is the one that I was about to quit my channel on March 4th of 2020 and say, forget all this noise. And then Godless Engineer came into the equation. Fast forward to 2021, Jeffrey Williams. So God is number one. Earlier, he said that somebody saw one of the shirts, my conversation starter shirts, I guess they were wearing, and it started a conversation. That's awesome.
I was writing to who is God is Nowhere? Who's that?
That's regular. God is Nowhere's around all the time. He says, dang, I'm here for Sal's teaching.
God is now here.
God is now here.
Oh, sorry.
God is now here.
Late night brain fart on reading the screen name there. Yes. God is now here. Sorry. Apologies.
Thank you.
And
sorry, I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. But thank you. Thank you for the kind words. God is now here.
It can be read. It could be read both
one way
ways.
or the other.
It's supposed to be God is now. Yeah.
Hey, listen, it's an open reading. Listen, it's an open reading frame, okay? And I had a frame shift point mutation, all right? What can I say?
That's actually an example of overlapping codes.
That's very true. That's very true. But hey, overlapping codes completely debunks the premise of a designer.
I found one.
Did you not get the memo on that, Sal? From the EVA? Did you not get the memo on that? Overlapping codes completely debunks the premise of a intelligent agent being necessary. That's an ongoing. That's an ongoing talking point from Pudding Brain in the gang.
I heard one argument that because the cell is so complicated, it couldn't possibly have been designed. But, the cell repairs itself. It's got damage control. It's got, quality control checks, all these things. Of course, it's going to be complicated because it does a lot.
Well, I don't, I have not watched, who in like 2 or 3 months. I will go to the channel just to see the titles and to see how many subscribers he has, but I will not. I've resisted the temptation to click and see his shows because really it's not good for my mental health to hang around that place.
Well, I agree with you to an extent. I actually go there for pure humor. because I mean it's really turned into a comedy hour at this point, and I get a good chuckle. I'll tune in for like 5 or 10 minutes, get a few good chuckles, then bounce out when they start getting completely ridiculous. It cracks me up, to be honest.
But I'll tell you, part of it is I got sick of just hearing me constantly misrepresented. I'm like, dude, I did not say that. It's so clear if you're willing to just actually listen rather than try to make something up just to criticize me, that's not my intended meaning at all. And then he'll try to say he's going to do an autopsy on my work. I'm like, dude, you're not qualified. I'm sorry. And no, you didn't refute anything I said. And he was trying to lecture me on my interpretation of stuff in population genetics. I didn't say it at the time. I said, this is actually part of my professional work, and I'm working with some pretty good scientists here. I didn't say that at the time, but now I can say it because my publication is out. And it's like, if you saw the names there, like Ola Hoscher and Bill Basner and John Sanford, it's like, yeah, you know, the crowd there is just not in a position to be criticizing me.
You were basically saying that the guys who couldn't even make it in the minor leagues are now telling the guys in the MLB or NFL or NBA that they don't. And even though like John Sanford, you know, he's a retired Hall of Famer, but it's like the guy who couldn't make it in the minor leagues. He couldn't even, not actually, let me rephrase. It's not that he didn't make it in the minor leagues. It's that he couldn't get into the minor leagues. Is now telling the guy who's using John Sanford as an example, the retired Hall of Famer, that he doesn't understand how the game is played.
Yeah.
And
in the particular paper, it'd be like Ola Hoscher is he's a reviewer. I'm almost positive of other papers given his stature.
Right. Well, it's kind of it's the same thing with like dumbasses like Andrew Cumming, who's in the side chat, which we know this will be definitely reviewed on the report because he's here, so he'll report to them. But it's same thing with like his ongoing talking point about is so and so doing research in X, and it's like James Tour, for example. In my interview with him, we talked about this, and he told me he gets 10 to 20 requests a day to review papers. A day. And then these little YouTube idiots run around claiming that he doesn't understand the chemistry that has to be accounted for. And I'm like, and he made the point, and other people made the point, but it's like, so you're telling me he doesn't understand the chemical reactions? That's what you're arguing. He doesn't understand the chemical reactions, what would have to go into, would have to be accounted for in order for these reactions to be plausible. And you're arguing that he can't go and read the methods and then understand what the hell they're talking about in the methods that are being described. Is that what you're claiming? Is that what you're claiming? That he wouldn't understand this? The guy who reviews papers, it doesn't understand the chemistry that's being outlined. He's not understanding what is being argued. Are you kidding me? That's like claiming that, you know, Einstein didn't understand the principles of physics, like the laws of physics. Like, come on now. This is like, we're getting out to lunch here at this point. And then it's the guy who didn't even, anyway, I'm not going to keep bashing him. It blows me away every time.
There's someone like John Peterson on that channel. Just like, dude, it's really not, you know, it's not healthy for me to invest any amount of time there. There's so many things I could be investing time in that are far more worthwhile.
No, for sure.
And I mean, it is, okay, this may sound really mean, but it is sometimes kind of fun to beat up on someone you know you can just annihilate. But you know, after a while, it's just like, okay, you know, I can only deal with so much stupidity. I mean, goodness. And the thing that is galling, it's like, dude, you're a high school dropout, all right? Burned your brains on drugs and alcohol. Please don't be, you know. I'm just like, you know, I'm this is my professional field for several years.
So you don't
Now
you
I know
don't
it can
make a
be.
bet that
No,
you know
I'm sorry.
you don't you don't make a bet that you don't already know that you're going to win, right?
I'd like to. Oh, no, those are the best, but there's no fun in that. But I mean, you look at me and Dr. Dan. We're on opposite sides, but I can actually have a conversation with him, you know, because he goes to great lengths. He said, Sal, does that really represent your position? He'll at least talk to me. He'll say, I disagree, but you know, he doesn't pull the garbage that I'm seeing on that other channel. And that's why I just gave up. I'm just like, dude, it's Brandolini's law. I'm going to spend an hour just explaining how you misrepresented me. And it's like, is this your whole show? You can't even just accurately represent what was said or articulated.
I think maybe it's an example of never arguing with an idiot because he'll drag you down to his level and beat you with experience.
Yeah. So, I'm happy to study. I was sent by Dr. Sanford to go to secular schools to study under evolutionists to learn about creationism. I know that sounds strange. So someone like Dr. Dan, I know there's sharp disagreements, but he's the sort of guy Dr. Sanford would send me to learn from. I can have a relationship with Dr. Dan, but that other guy, all the kind of nasty taunts, I'm just like, dude, that's so rude. You don't talk to people like that you're trying to be friends with. You don't trash talk them to their face like that. And he does that to me. And I said, I'm done. So, see, you can see I get exercised even just the mention of his name.
But that could be why he never really learned anything, because he never listened and never respected his teachers.
Well, that's potentially true. What's funny over here is look at Andrew. He's trying to play defense. And Tour, when did I say Tour is wrong? Yeah. Sure, buddy. Never seen that. I'm pretty sure if we go to the live chat of my interviews, there was a bunch of trash talking from Andrew Cumming about how Dr. Tour is not qualified to have an opinion on the whole topic. So, which I find I've always found fascinating when Andrew talks so much trash about insert whoever doesn't agree with evolution or whatever. It's like we have the kid who just graduated from high school insisting that all these guys who have differences of opinion from him must just be unqualified in they haven't necessarily spent longer than he's been alive looking into things. It's kind of interesting, but that's just me.
Well, speaking of James Tour, and being an origin of life researcher is a step down from actually doing real chemistry. I'm sorry, because it's speculation and a lot of self-delusion. I mean, I was hearing Lee Cronin talk. I'm like, guy, why are you picking chemicals that aren't, you're trying to prove that proteins can self-assemble and these other biomolecules. So why are you working with salts, salt crystals? I mean, what's the relevance? Didn't you point that out in your paper that this is irrelevant? I mean, I couldn't live with myself if I publish papers like that. It's just delusional.
What's funny about that is like very often you get to the end and it's like whatever we've just spent the last 17 pages rambling about has no relevance to the prebiotic earth. Whatever. It's like, well, hang on. So the title was explaining the origin of X, just a paraphrasing here. And then, okay, hang on. So you use the word origin of, And then you framed this to all somehow be an explanation in origin of life research. And then you have concluded that your entire premise is not valid if life doesn't exist. So if life must exist in order for your concept to be plausible, what the hell is the point of your article? Like, this has no relevance other than you trying to say I published something and get funded again. Like, let's get real. We all know this is what is going on. You guys have to publish something. Otherwise, you can't justify your next round of funding. We all know this. This is known. Everybody in academia knows this. Like, come on. And I'm not just saying for Origin of Life. I'm talking about like across the board in academia. Like, everybody knows this. This is not some hidden secret. Anyway.
Yeah. So, you know, this criticism, I don't buy that he doesn't publish an Origin of Life. He doesn't know. I'm just like, that is such a pseudoscientific field. Why would you want to sully your reputation with real chemists? I mean, you know, I mean, some of these reactions are so clearly unnatural. That's why they needed all these machines to make them happen. I mean,
but don't forget, according to Professor Dave, if we were able to build a machine for it, that means it's not that complicated.
How's he doing now? I mean, some guy dropped into my channel. Huh?
Well, it's just, you know, the whole premise is just crazy, you know, that this is the origin of life, but then they use a laboratory and completely unnatural conditions. I mean, how does that prove that's the origin of life? It's just silly on the face of it. Even if they did succeed, it's still silly.
Yeah, but they don't even have any information going on. There's no direction. There's no instruction. So I don't even know what they're even talking about.
So anyway, so we don't know anything of what's happened to Professor Dave.
No, it's wannabe Dave. Wannabe Dave.
Yeah, wannabe Dave.
Well, he still, to my knowledge, he claims that the offer to debate Dr. Tour was never actually made, even though it was made twice. Yep. Wannabe Dave and his little minions all claim that Dr. Tour never actually made the offer. It's like, not only did he make the offer, he reiterated the offer after the second round of insults. He reiterated the offer in spite of that. I mean, it's like that little soy boy knows that he would get utterly obliterated in that
Dave
context.
did manage to sully Dr. Tour's reputation, though. If you look at the comments on the page, it's like, oh, Dr. Tour is such a moron. Oh, how could this idiot? I mean, it just goes on and on. You know, these people, they consider Dr. Tour lower than dirt now, which is kind of sucks.
Well, it does, but the bad part is, what's so sad is Dave actually embarrassed himself in the second round. That's what's amazing is the ignorance and the desperation of the atheists. They don't even realize how, like, they're claiming that wannabe Dave somehow debunked and, you know, destroyed Professor Dr. Tour, and they don't even realize how bad it was. That's what just blows me away. I mean, the fact that like that little I went off on wannabe Dave in his comments, and he kept denying the point that I was making. But that stupid paper from 2009 that he quoted that he claimed just was like a be all end all. The same author published a paper on the exact same topic in December of 2019 that concluded they had not solved the problem that they had postulated having a potential answer for in 2009. And that dumbass quoted the 2009 paper from the same author. It's like, you don't even realize that the scientist you're quoting actually contradicts your point that's being made. Like, if you don't grasp how dumb that is. You shouldn't even be making an argument. And the fact
Man,
that
I've
people
run
are
into that.
believing you is just anyway, I yield. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I've run into that so many times that atheists will rush to a. It's almost as though they like during the argument they want to rush to some evidence in science that supports them, and so they go to the first peer-reviewed paper they find, they skim it, and they're like, this supports my argument, and then so they throw it to you. They just like kind of bomb you with these peer-reviewed things, and then you actually go through them. You actually read them, and you realize, oh my God, this atheist doesn't realize this actually refutes all his points. It's funny, man. I ran into that so many times.
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. What I find very fascinating is the number of times I have, and we all have heard this. Oh, if you believe in intelligent design, creation, whatever, you only read abstracts. And what I've been finding is the polar opposite. And I forget which paper it was. I actually even busted Dodgeball Dan one time on that. He did exactly that. He quoted from the abstract. I pulled up the whole paper, read from the conclusion, and the conclusion was the total opposite of the point that he had made from the abstract. And it's like, come on, dude. You're pushing some points here.
Yeah,
but
one thing, another thing I was going to say. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to add that atheists, they just read the conclusions sometimes. Some of the ones I argue, it's just like they just read the conclusions. They completely ignore the rest of the material. Like nuts, man.
Right, but they're just saying whatever they wanted to say, regardless of what the facts are. They just want to make their point and make their statement and hold to it, regardless of what the paper says or what facts are.
Yeah. That would explain why they would just jump to the conclusion. Like, I don't have to read this paper. I can just read the conclusion and understand what the rest of it says.
Yeah, ignoring the details though that show that what the title or the abstract says is pretty common. Plus, they're often way out of date. They'll like go RNA world or all these other theories that have been debunked quite a while ago, and so it just kind of surprises me how they just aren't up to date and don't look at the details. There's fatal flaws in just about every one of the crazy theories they have, but yet they still subscribe to them and they don't seem to realize the fatal flaws.
No, definitely. Sorry.
Go ahead, Sal.
I was just going to ask Ray a question. Your icon, I've been dying to ask you, what is that? The helicopter?
Yeah, it's like what was it Pinochet did? He would take atheists up, or not atheists, pretty much the same thing, communists, on a helicopter ride, just the upwards part of it, and then they'd have to get back to the ground on their own.
Oh, wow.
It's a little grim, but I've always hated commies ever since I was a little kid when I didn't even know why I should hate them.
You know what? I'd say the amount of in plain sight commies that are walking the halls of Washington, D.C. is getting beyond the pale at this point. I mean,
amen.
They're just everywhere. And I'd say what's really blowing me away, have you guys been following the madness in Australia?
Yes. Depressing.
It is astonishing. But I'd say okay, so did you see the stuff like the last couple days where Dan Andrews, the premier of Victoria, shut down the construction industry? Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay. So this has happened in the past 3 days. Okay. Started on Monday. Yep. Okay. So the premier, so like the governor, right? He decided to shut down hey, all the construction industry, you're now shut down for the next 2 weeks. Okay. Now, to put this in context, I just learned this today. The construction industry in the state of Victoria is 50% of the GDP for the entire state. Okay. Can you imagine if one industry, number one, was the GDP, 50% of the GDP of a state, right? But number two, the governor just said, you guys are all shut down. Like, because you pissed me off. Because here's the thing, they were protesting something. And in retaliation to their protest, he shut it down for 2 weeks. And then ex post facto said, oh, there were 300 cases over the past 2 months that came from construction sites. So therefore, we're shutting you down for 2 weeks. Well, let's just say that this has led to a bunch of really pissed off males that are not soy boys. And they're also, not only are they pissed off at the premier, they're really pissed off at the head of their union who sold them out. And they stormed the union hall and were like fighting the union bosses, literally fighting them on the street, right? And then did a huge protest. Anyway, long story short, the tradies, they call them there, have said, okay, fine, you're putting us on a shutdown. We're protesting every day. And yesterday they stormed the Parliament building and there was like 20,000 of them surrounding the Parliament. And then they sent in the riot police and started shooting them with rubber bullets. And these guys are just standing there and they're like shooting them with rubber bullets and stuff. Everybody left. But then they came back again. And anyway, I think Australia is like on the edge of who knows what. And I don't, here's the thing is today I was watching I saw a report on Sky News. This dumbass is doubling down on his position. The governor, like the premier, is doubling down his position. I'm like, dude, you have finally pissed off the only demographic that you should actually be afraid of. And there's over 300,000 of these they call the tradies in the state of Victoria. He's pissed off 300,000 males that are like physically strong. And I'm just like, what? You are an idiot. And here's the part that really gets me. I Googled this. For the entire country of Australia, there's only about 17,000 cops. For the entire country. And you've pissed off 300,000 men that are in one state. I mean, just like, have you not done the math on the fact that it is not possible for you to, if they decide to take you, like to come for you, you cannot stop 300,000 men. It is not possible. You don't have enough bullets. There's not enough guns for you to stop that many guys. I mean, it's like short of like hardcore, full scale massacre with, automatic rifles and stuff. And even then they could take you. Anyway, I'm blown away at the stupidity of politicians.
Yeah, well, stupid politicians are certainly a dime a dozen here. But it's surprising how many restrictions they've been putting up with, too. I heard something like the Australian police can demand to know where you are, and you have to send them a picture of your location within 5 minutes or whatever, or they'll come and arrest you. It's like they've just gone totally full-on Chinese Communist Party.
Well, absolutely. And Melbourne, where all this is going down, has now officially been recognized as the most locked down city ever. So more so than the Nazis, more so than the Soviets, all that stuff. Melbourne, the most locked down city in recorded history.
And what's the reason for the lockdown? Is it corona variants or something?
Now it's not even that it's not even the spike. It's until everybody gets a certain percentage of people get vaccinated. You're on lockdown. It's nuts.
I would have thought Australia was more reasonable than that. That's terrible.
No, Australia's not even being reasonable. No, their government is just on full scale. Like they're in power. They've tasted power and are not giving it up.
Man, I love their video games. There's a video game out of Australia called Dead Island. I don't know if you've ever played it. Like it I don't know, kind of sounds like, and the content of the game is riotous, zombies going fucking nuts, you know, like hordes of people just raging. It's nuts, man. It's like what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's getting pretty crazy. I'm gonna see if I can find that. Man, I tell you what, the stuff that happened at the Union Hall was freaking epic. That guy better hope he never has to meet those guys in a dark alley.
Hey, John Maddox, are you still in the Tennessee area in case I ever drive through there?
Oh yeah, I'm still in Nashville.
Well, I'm really glad I ran into you tonight. I don't know how often I'll be able to be on YouTube. I really miss hanging out like this. But well, other things kind of are demanding my time right now. So, so I'm if because if you go, I have less reason to even come out to YouTube because you're like one of my. It's kind of like a pillar of the creationist internet. If you go,
oh, well, I appreciate that.
It feels kind of lonely if I don't come out here.
Oh man, you're always welcome. Yeah, I'm not going away. It's like I said. I mean, Jeffrey Williams has got me back in the game.
And can you? Oh, before I forget, James Coons recruited me for Saturday night, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do it."
Who are you debating?
Skylar Fiction on Old Testament ethics.
Oh, good Lord!
The cherry pick.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Yes, because I thought about it. I said I'll come from an angle they're not expecting.
It's going to be nothing but God kills babies. Do you believe in drowning babies? Do you believe in drowning babies? Do you believe in drowning babies? That's all it's going to be. The whole debate. Every debate I've ever seen him do when he talks about Old Testament ethics, it's going to turn into God kills babies. That's it.
Well,
that's his only talking.
And well, thank you for. See, I'm glad now we're having the conversation because you could at least. I can prepare for how this is, how this will be. Do you know anything about Mr. Batman? Who he is? He's supposed to be my tag team partner.
Oh, good Lord.
Okay, you know what?
Yeah, he's pretty interesting.
I'm gonna just give my playbook. I said it doesn't matter what I believe. If the facts say that God, the God of the Bible, is the true God, that's what counts. It shouldn't be that you're trying to just make what's there unappealing. It may well be unappealing to us, but we're not. I mean, the thing is if you ask me that, you're assuming that I'm any authority or any human being can decide what's ethical. What gives us the grounds to decide ultimately what's ethical? And I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to just repeat that because I'm not going to, the issue is whether it's true or not. It's not whether we like it or not. And maybe we could be a little bit more charitable in interpreting some of the passage, and some of it's not altogether clear. And that's going to be it.
Man, if I might say something about that, if you're going to actually go through with that, there's a guy on PSF. Have you ever seen that channel? PSF, secular. Man, I forgot what it's called. Promethean Secular Frontier.
No, I've never visited that.
Well, there's one guy that has a show on there, and he speaks to theists and stuff, and he brings up this thing. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get dark on you real quick. What about God killing babies?" And because it is kind of like something out of nowhere, just to bring up, like, why are you talking about killing babies? You know what I mean? Like, it's something.
Well, my answer. I mean, this is good debate practice. I'd say he's the creator. He has the right to do with what he I mean, he's the one who defines what
No,
ethics
no,
is.
no. I'm not asking you to justify it. I'm a theist. I'm on your side. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Thank you.
and what I would say, it was interesting that the reason I referred to this podcast or whatever it is, PSF, is because this atheist was interviewing a theist, and the theist responded, I know, hey man, it's okay, you can get dark with me, man. It's okay, you can bring that stuff up. Us we theists, we can't, truly explain why that's so, but we understand that there's reasons God allows dark things to occur, and why God doesn't interfere in this sense that I think atheists have a very naive sense of like a so-called, I used to use the common parody, Sky Daddy, that's watching, and they attributed like this guy, he's all powerful, he could just jump in and save us. Why doesn't he do it? You know what I mean? And I think that's the naive interpretation. You should question Skylar on that. If he even tries to bring that up, like, how do you understand this? Do you think it's just some dude just letting people get raped and then letting people sin, or because I don't think that's how any like really sophisticated theologian understands God.
Well,
It's not.
actually, the Bible answers some of that. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm just saying that they have a deeper understanding than that. It's not just someone letting something happen. Like I think that's a straw man.
Well, I agree with you. I'd say something that always strikes me is the fact that judgment was not brought until the law, is a passage of scripture, right? And if the flood was prior to the law being given, and therefore not guilty, and if we are actually immortal, then God actually, from God's perspective, number one, he wasn't killing anybody. Because the soul is immortal. And if you were not being sent to judgment afterwards, because the judgment has not been put in place yet until post-law, then they're not actually being just obliterated, which is what the atheist perspective is, right? Like God just annihilated these people's existence, right? And it's like,
point.
it's like, well, if God, you're operating from this perspective that like they went to hell and all these little babies were just burned alive and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like, well, if you actually paid attention, you would looked at what it said right here, the potential there wasn't any judgment for them, in spite of the fact that the evil that they were doing. And I've often thought about it in the context of, if Christ, while post crucifixion, was preaching the truth to a group, and the Bible says that before the law and all this kind of stuff, there was basically a grace given. And this goes back to, I don't know if you were here earlier when I was talking about the postmortem opportunity, but it is completely within the realm of possibility that all of those individuals were being told the truth was being preached to them in a different context than what we experience. And if that is so, then a gigantic leg, if you will, of the standard atheist talking point about this gets utterly obliterated, because the just God is giving those people a chance for eternal immortality that, from the atheist perspective, was just being arbitrarily obliterated by God with no mercy, no justice, no benevolence, etc., etc. And to the point you made, Jimmy, it's like they have a very small frame of reference, and it's very like childlike and myopic position. They don't actually think about anything from a big picture perspective.
It's all from the perspective of ego. Like, I can only know what I can sense, and I can never go beyond that. I can only trust what I can establish with science and knowledge and what they can show me. I won't care to speculate further, because now I'm not dealing in reality, because the only science can show me what it can show me. Yeah, it's very myopic, man. And I mean, now I was gonna say you painted a picture of like I was thinking of this atheist of just tiling his reality over with just the tiles and tiles of their own self-justifying truth, which is just all narrative, surrounding them. Like there is no truth there. It's just awesome. It's just things, whole bunch of post notes that they tell themselves and talking points, and
Oh, before I forget, you kind of, I'm just guessing you rolled your eyes when I said Mr. Batman. So tell me who he is.
So Mr. Batman, I'd say he is probably late 50s, early 60s. I believe he was a teacher. He's a character for sure. Okay, I'll put it this way. Mr. Batman can make good arguments, and then sometimes he can make very whacked out arguments. And it'll probably depend on whether or not he's been drinking or not.
And then the other opponent is Dr. Josh.
Oh
Okay.
man, I talked to him, and he's very dismissive. Like he's gonna dismiss everything you say. Like it doesn't even bother examining.
Who is he?
Okay, so Dr. Josh, he is very knowledgeable. He's a PhD. He, I believe, in Assyrian something or other, but he was a pastor at one point, and then he became an atheist.
Whoa!
And like for example, the book he just published was the Atheist Guide to the Old Testament. He's been a host on the Atheist Experience a few times, and a variety of different atheist shows. But basically, he's a ancient Near Eastern text guy, and he'll take it from a very, very academic perspective.
Well, thank
Very
you for the
academic.
heads up.
Yeah, Dr. Josh is. He's a legit. His knowledge base is legitimate, for sure. He's not. He won't be the usual. He won't be the usual idiot on MDD.
Yeah. Thank you.
But he'll twist everything. He'll
He's
just
not
twist
like
everything and say they'll use it. He'll use it against God and say bad things about God and everything.
Yeah. One reason I wanted to undertake this is I have some of my apologetic ideas because I do have to try to deal with Old Testament stuff because I read it and I studied it and I've struggled through it. A lot of the questions, a lot of the issues still raised, I've had problems with myself and I've had to work through them. And so this is a chance to test out, how well my arguments are. And then plus there's still the art of just being able to debate and argue a topic. Now,
Sal, do you watch Tang or the Atheist Network Group, or they're formerly known as the Atheist Roundtable?
No. I only watch a little bit because I think
I only say this because I wanted to kind of prepare you. They a lot of their arguments are towards the first early Testament. The arguments that even Dr. Josh has been on their show, and he's kind of like camaraderies with all these the ACA and a lot of these atheist podcasts that are online. He kind of jumps around on all of them, and he's well immersed into this community.
Yeah,
your opponent.
I was about to say that's all quashed by the evidence. I said, if you want to accept that the universe came by itself, you want to accept that life came by itself, that's on you. But I'll just say that it's not very credible scientifically at this point. A lot of people are recognizing that. So if you want to insist, depending on his definition of atheism, if you really is like 99% sure that there's no God, I'm just like, well, okay.
Yeah.
I can you know, I can understand why you feel that way, but I'm not there, and I'm not here, and I'm not here to convert him. I'm more interested to see what he has to say, because if it's nothing more than he just doesn't like it, I said, that's not much, you know, that's not a very convincing argument. You'd have to refute the evidence that a great intelligence put us together.
One undermined Sal, I think, topic in any one of these discussions that comes up is defining God on both parties, even if for the atheists, you know, because how are you an atheist unless you have no definition of God? Then you're something like a theological non-cognitivist. You know, you don't make sense of the term. You know, you have to. I think in order to be, you have to have some sense of what you're rejecting. In other words. And you know, one undermining discussion is defining the very term God. You know, that very rarely happens in any single one of these debates.
Well, I think creator would be sufficient for. That's one thing I don't like to get in definitional debates.
Yeah.
Just say, do you think that do you think the evidence indicates a mind greater than ours?
Yeah, I just hear Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris like go on for like 2 hours debating what is truth. You know, it's the same argument. You know.
Yeah, you know, I don't.
Yeah, but they're
to your point. Go ahead, John.
They're going to use the morality argument as if they have a higher standard of morality than God Himself. That's what they're standing on, is that they're more moral than God most of the time.
100%. If God would kill babies, therefore, even if that God does exist, I reject. I mean, that is. By the way, Sal, I forget who it was against, but Skylar Fiction debated CJ and somebody else. I forget who the other person was. There was another tag team. But they debated like a very similar topic a couple months ago.
I wonder if they're pro-choice, as they call it, which would make their whole God-killing babies thing moronic, even more moronic than it is, of course, because
I think Skylar is the pro-lifer.
He is.
I mean, good on him for that, really. I mean, I do have to give credit where credit's due. I was impressed. He's a pro-lifer, because a lot of atheists are not.
Yep.
So he has some conscience in there, which I'm just like, yeah. So he's an ex-Christian, and part of that's still with him. You know, he's pro-lifer. But most atheists, you'd be absolutely right, Ray. Especially the ones that believe in euthanasia too.
All right, real quick. If you want to see something crazy real quick. So this is from the other day in Australia. The building that's about to be getting attacked is their union hall. Okay. This is crazy.
The protesters now turn on the CPU. You stand up! You stand up! You stand up! So-called leader has been. They have now barricaded themselves in to protect themselves from the crowd, the members.
Yeah. Nothing crazy happening in Australia right now.
Yeah, it was a calm and peaceful, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I tell you what, man, those guys in that building had to have been pissing their pants. They were trying to act all tough and whatnot. But you got 10,000+ dudes surrounding like up and down the street that are all pissed off at you. I mean, that's gotta be intimidating, no matter how brave you are. That's pretty crazy. Okay, folks, you guys are welcome to keep talking. I gotta pass out, but I get up early in the morning. Y'all are welcome to keep going. Anybody who wants to join real quick. I'll let you in, and y'all can keep talking. But Sal, great to see you. Jimmy, awesome talking with you. Ray, as always. Jungle, good to see you, brother.
God bless you.
Yeah, I gotta go too. I gotta work tomorrow too, so I gotta take off.
Yeah, I got to bail too, but I miss your evidence and reasons things, Sal, and of course, I always enjoy LPP stuff.
Yes. So I did do a show while LPP had his show going. That was I tried not to collide with LPP shows, but I was just really eager to have a show today because I had my second peer-reviewed paper this year.
I know, that's so cool.
In Nature, in a Nature publication, not Nature the journal. And
invading enemy territory.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big deal. That might be the pinnacle of my secular science publishing work.
No, don't sell yourself short, Sal.
No, thanks. Well, it's not because there aren't good things to talk about. It's just that all the deplatforming. So even when you have something that's worth putting forward, it's going to be suppressed. So the lead author, Bill Basner, really, he deserves really the credit for how we got through, because he broke just enough new ground that we could get published, and we were able to piggyback some other things with that. And we are worried that there might be a retraction if they figure out who we are, but it's like, well, why? Because almost everything we said already exists in secular peer review. We're just collecting it all together in one spot.
Kind of like what Francis and Crick did with the DNA. They took other people's research and cobbled together their answer.
Oh, well, yeah. But yeah, I don't know if they ever credited Rosalind Franklin. Oh well.
RJ Downard is doing the same thing towards what he thinks is like, good arguments towards, because he's trying to rail against creationism, and I was going to tell you, Sal, I really enjoyed your debate with Matt Dillahunty, man. That was awesome. I thought he did great, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
he had the theater, but no substance.
And the topic was awesome.
Thank you. I also debated RJ Downard. I think most people think that was my best debate ever performance.
I haven't seen that one. I gotta check that out.
Oh, that was. Oh yeah.
I kind of.
He didn't expect that you could tell I surprised him in a few spots because I was quoting papers right off the top of my head, and he's just like, "Whoa," He thought he had me on a few points. And
I was invited onto the Atheist Edge once, and with Jim Hall, and he kind of surprised me, or he kind of threw a curveball on me, because I thought I was just going to be in this discussion amongst the panel, but he turned it around and it was like 6 atheists versus 1 theist, me, the lone theist, in the room, and I guess he had RJ Downard as backup, to try to naysay any point I might have made. But I was able to hold my ground against both of them, and against Jim Hall and RJ Downard at the same time, and against all of them actually in the whole room. I was literally the lone wolf, man. And
good for you.
Yeah. No, thank you. But yeah, I mean, no. So I wish you all the luck, man. I really hope you do well, and I hope you really consider what we've all said today, because you're, being part of the stream. And I like your contribution too, man. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ray, I hope you, if you're ever inclined to, you can drop in and see. Emery and I did an hour or so show on the paper that got published, and I have links there in the video description to the actual paper. But I really miss you guys, because I've gotten really, really busy, and also now that I'm mobile, since Mom has gone home to be with the Lord, I'm actually able to meet people in person. And whereas before, internet was really my only outreach to anyone, because we were, during the lockdown, I was at home 24/7 for almost 15 months. So that's one reason you don't see me so much on YouTube. But I do miss all the good times. So I think I'd be lucky to be able to get maybe one show a week, at least for the foreseeable future. Maybe at some point I'll be able to do it more regularly. I doubt I'll ever be where I was this past summer, where it was like 2 hours a night at least. That was a lot of fun and very meaningful to me. But I'm going to miss not doing that anymore.
Me too. Or from the watching point of view.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for thank you for being such a faithful friend and supporter of the channel, and visiting so many of my shows. So so who knows, maybe we'll run into each other again somewhere. So I got to check out. I'm actually getting really tired now. So
yeah, it's about time for me to head for head for bed.
And just so you know, my prayer group prayed for you. And,
oh, thank you very much.
yeah.
I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
believe in the prayer. I'll keep holding on, because I know God will think of something. I'm all out of ideas.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I finally asked you about that helicopter, because that looks a lot like the cover to a musical called Miss Saigon. So I didn't, and I said, oh, it's not exactly that, because I see someone falling out of the helicopter.
Yeah, there was some commie on comments section. He said he hated my icon. I said, yeah, freedom of speech is really overrated.
And Jimmy, it's nice meeting you, and thank you for your kind words about my debate with Matt Dillahunty. So I'm sorry I have to bail out, guys, and to everyone in the chat too. It's great seeing you, and maybe I'll see you all somewhere. And God bless you. So take care and good night.
Yeah, likewise,
Good night.
man. I think Pascal's wagers is like one of the more interesting topics in religion. And I know that was the content of your debate, but man, yeah, good night, man. Hopefully we'll get to speak again sometime.
All righty, take care.
Right. Good night and God bless. God bless everyone.